we are live, and although you can not see them just yet, I do have Matt and Sid with me. That was their cue to say something.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
We are here even when we are invisible.
They've got their rings on, which is fine. It's actually really important that this screen doesn't show them so that I could navigate to other things in Discord and let people know that I'm live without it jumbling all around. So that's why I keep them off of here. Let me just go ahead and fetch
You fit so well into that habit hole, John.
Let's just fetch the URL for the YouTube live and get the the chat up. Oh, I don't like hearing myself. Let's turn that off. All right, we are live on Twitch. We are live on YouTube. I'm just going to go ahead and take a moment to do a little bit last-second advertising. I'll also text Laurel to let her know. Okay, there we go. Now we'll come back to where I could see Matt and Sid. See, when I'm doing that, I can't see them, so for all I know, they could be making all sorts of obscene gestures. You know, like the Eye of Sauron and the White Hand of Isengard, all that good stuff.
And the cruel red spike of Caradhras.
Ah, of course, yes. Yes. And the three towers of Thangorodrim. All right, let me just send a text message over to Laurel, letting her know. Oh, come on now. Okay. All right, there we go. Go back to where I could see the YouTube chat. There we go. All right, so we're going to get started fairly soon. Hey, Moogle, how's it going? We're going to be inviting a lot of participation today, and especially from the chat. So it's going to be a little different structure today. Oh, good to hear, Moogle. Good to hear. A little bit of a different structure today, and I've been advertising this for, well, like 6 weeks at this point. I've been talking about us doing this because it's something that, it was an idea that I had that every once in a while we could deviate from the norm and do something together. And then Sid had this specific idea for this specific topic that we're going to be doing. And hey there, Chewy. How's it going? I love it. Every time Chewy comes into the chat, he's one of our YouTube members, he greets us with the emotes that represent two different gestures, one of which is the metal horns, and the other of which is live long and prosper. And I actually, as a fellow Trekker, I appreciate that. You know, so this was like sort of the melding of an idea that I had for a while and an idea that Sid came up with for this specific topic. And we're going to be doing it sort of semi-regularly, not like every month, certainly not, but like about twice a year, we're going to come together and do something different and special and unique that deviates from the normal Council of Tolkien. And of course, I will give a full preamble going over the basics before we start, and then I'm going to head it off to Matt, who is going to start us off, and then I will be going second, and then Sid will be going last, and then Sid also has a special outro that he's going to do, which is going to be fun.
John, remember, I want about 1 minute after your intro before.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
No, for something completely different, exactly. So, Yeah, we'll just give it a few minutes to let the stream populate a bit before we start in earnest, so that people don't miss anything. And of course, if you're not here live, the video on demand will be on my Twitch channel for about a week before it vanishes, and it will be available for members on my YouTube, and then permanently for everybody else after a couple of weeks. So, the video on demands on YouTube don't ever expire, unlike Twitch, where you have to kind of act fast before they disappear. I don't have control over that. As a matter of fact, the only control I have over that is whether I want them to be there at all. Which I can't imagine why you wouldn't want. Well, I guess some people... I knew somebody who... Moogle with the watch streak. There you go. Nice. So my friend there, the Moogle Master, for Matt and Sid, who don't know, he's on the Twitch side of the stream. And Twitch has a special thing where people can share their streaks if they've not missed a stream. And so right now, Moogle has watched 195 streams without missing one of my channel.
Wow.
And if you think that's impressive, another one of the people that come in, my friend Gray, he's closer to 600.
Well, he's coming to Thanksgiving this year, John, so look out.
Well, he's down in Florida, but if he found his way up here, I would certainly invite him for a meal. And hello there, Will. How's it going? It's past midnight where you are, listening for as long as you stay awake. Now, see, part of me wants to say that our soothing voices and our wonderful wisdom and knowledge will lull you into a deep sleep where you will have fair dreams and wisdom. And part of me hopes that it's so compelling that you can't sleep. So we'll see how that works. By the way, where are you located that it's that late? Are you in, I suppose you must be in Europe. You don't have to give us an exact location, just a country would be fine. Sometimes I'll ask people, where are you from? And they'll be like, why do you want to know? It's like, I don't need your address, just your country, man. Right? Yeah. Oh, Jesus, Moogle. Oh, my God. Eru Aluvatar. Okay. You're from the UK. Well, wonderful, wonderful. Greetings from the United States. Me and Sid here are both on the East Coast, and Matt is on the West Coast. So,
The edge of the world.
Well, any further west, and you wind up in the Undying Lands, you know.
Or in the east, right. if the world is round.
Yeah, exactly. Well, of course it is round. But
I go to the ocean and I look at the edge of night.
You see, you know what it is that if you sail from the west of California, or in Matt's case in Washington, no, wait, you are in California, aren't you?
Who?
You.
Oh, no, Washington.
Okay, all right. I know some people in California, some people in Washington. I was getting it mixed up. So my initial thought was correct. You're in Washington. And if you sail to the west and you're immortal, you wind up in, Japan, Korea, Russia, those sorts of places. But if you're an immortal elf, then you will find Valinor.
And if you want to go to Tol Eressëa, you're going to find your way to Guam.
There you go.
Matt, do you live close to Deception Pass?
I wouldn't say close, but yeah, that's about an hour and a half from here.
Yeah. I've seen amazing landscape all over North America, and Deception Pass is one of the most beautiful things I have ever seen. It's like the entire Pacific Ocean is saying, continent, get out of the way, but not making a lot of progress.
Perhaps that's where Tur met Olmo. Oh, and hey there, Dizzy, and hey there, Medio.
Washington is full of...
Medio says he's also from Washington, and Dizzy says that his girlfriend is from Guam. So we have people from all over the place, which is wonderful.
And that fellow you mentioned who's in Florida might not make it up for Thanksgiving. Tell him to drop by my place.
Well, there you go. There you go. All right, guys, we're going to switch over to the screen so you'll actually be able to see my lovely co-hosts. And hey, Gray, there's Gray. Gray's watch streak, well, I just said it was nearly 600. Gray, you have not missed a single stream for 600. That is almost 2 years of stream straight. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Gray. Like I said, if you do want to come up here, I don't know for Thanksgiving, but if you ever find your way in my neck of the woods, I definitely have you here. I'll make you some eggs or something.
He's going to get a thank you note with a Mordor seal on it.
Oh, there you. Well, no, I have the Shire one. You have the Mordor one.
Yeah, nobody wants that, I don't think.
Well, okay, so let me give sort of a very brief preamble, just explain how things are working, and then Sid is also going to have a little intro, and then we're going to start. So today is the Caradhras special, which I did want to do these specials like every 6 months or so, and the first one is Sid's idea, because we had a little bit of a diversion of thought between the three of us, which is a beautiful, wonderful thing, as I'm sure Sid will tell you, about what exactly caused the storm at Caradhras that forced the Fellowship of the Ring to not take that path and to instead have to decide whether they were going to go south through the Gap of Rohan or through the Mines of Moria. And of course, you all know they eventually went through the Mines of Moria for all the good that did and all the ill that did. And so we're going to be taking a deep dive into the events from the pass of Caradhras through to them coming out of Moria and taking just a deep look at some of the unseen figures that may be at work, starting with what exactly caused that storm. And to give you guys like some options here, and these are by no means all of the options, but within the text of The Lord of the Rings, we are given several different opinions of what caused the storm because, of course, the characters discuss it. Gimli, for example, thinks that the mountain itself is alive in its own way and has its own will, and that all mountains are alive and have their own will, and that Caradhras, as far as mountains go, is just a bit of a jerk and didn't want them on their mountain. I believe it was Boromir that suggested that perhaps Sauron himself caused the storm, and Gandalf's comment on that was that if that was the true, that his arm would have grown very long, but it was certainly something that he was not saying is impossible. And then, of course, there is the view that Peter Jackson had that it was Saruman who caused it. And that doesn't really agree with the book, but that is his view. And we're going to hear Matt's view, and we're going to hear my view, and we're going to hear Sid's view. And the way that each section is going to work is that in the discussions between the three of us, as well as the discussions that we are inviting from both chat rooms that are here watching us, during each section, we want to treat the one view that is being examined as being the truth. So, for example, Matt is going to go first, and he's going to tell us what he believes caused the storm at Caradhras. And, of course, due to that, we're all going to sort of agree with him during his section. And then when I do my section, we're going to agree with me. And when Sid does his section, we're going to agree with him. Now, there is one last thing to mention here is that Sid sent out a list of 9 questions regarding various mysteries that happened during this particular few chapters of The Lord of the Rings, starting with The Ring Goes South and Journey in the Dark and the Bridge of Khazad-dûm, and maybe even a little bit after that. And hey, Santa Cruz, how's it going? And out of those 9 questions, we have all selected 5 that we are going to address. I don't know which 5 they chose. They don't know which 5 I chose. They don't know which 5 each other chose. And it's going to be a sort of an interesting look at which questions which mysteries are we looking at? What are we attracted to? So, Sid, I'm going to briefly turn it over to you because you have a little bit to say before we really get started.
I just want to hit on for a minute or two to say 2 things. One is, why is this wacky idea important to me? And how will I hope you participate? What happened was, by accident, we briefly talked about this 3 months ago, and I learned enough to know we all have different views. If we were asserting this is what happened, we'd all be saying, I'm right, and you guys got to be wrong. But we're not going to do that. Because Tolkien believed that each reader completes the story in a way that satisfies his or her own heart and soul. And also, we are collaborators. I can support someone in, writing a better, imagine all these become articles. I can support someone in writing a better article, presenting a view I disagree with. So my goal here is to show a true synergy of working together as creative people is not a meeting of minds. It's mutual respect, helping each other define our own vision that is true for us. And Tolkien teaches us how to do this on fairy stories and in his letters. And so let's enjoy the differences. And at the end, you can either come up with your own view, or you can say, well, the one that works for me is Matt's or John's, or maybe mine. But the beauty of it is we get more by continuing to disagree and collaborate than we would by trying to find an unrealistic agreement. And listen with that in mind, and throw us thoughts and questions with that in mind as well, please.
Yep. And during each section, for example, when I'm speaking, I'm going to expect that at some point Sid will break in with a question, or Matt will break in with a question, or they'll have something to support me, or I'll have something to support them. And we're going to be, like I said, each section we're going to treat the view that is being discussed as the truth, and we're also inviting the chat to, if you have a question, jump in, and I will bring that to whoever's attention it needs. And like I said, we're not going to do very, very strict time limits here. Just, enough for everybody to get their thoughts out and to let the chat agree upon everything. Well, not agree, but to participate. So, Matt, you are first up on the docket here. So let's say, starting with Caradhras, what is your view of the storm here? And of course, which questions did you choose to answer? So whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you, and welcome everybody. My initial thought when I was talking to Sid about this was it's kind of summed up into the idea that Tolkien is very clear about Middle Earth, Arda, being a place that is similar to our world, and that those weather patterns and other things are something that is common to his world and his universe, and at the same time we have magical beings who have magical enchanted power, however you want to categorize this, who is merged into this fabric of this world. So, and it's much more palpable, it's much more direct. The beings are more powerful and things. So instead of, like I was talking to John earlier, instead of just having a regular chocolate chip cookie, we have a cookie here, or a world that kind of has a couple or three things going on here at the same time. And I believe those three main elements are natural events, natural weather patterns. We also have the ability to affect elemental aspects of the environment, and we have the third thing is different levels of what I believe to be power. There are some beings that are powerful enough to do this kind of thing, and there are some beings that have some enchantment or magical ability and are not powerful enough necessarily to affect weather patterns the way that this happened at Caradhras. And I tend to have a feeling that, and a belief, not just a feeling, but a conclusion in my own mind in reading this, and having done it for a lot of years, like these guys, and that is that just because there are powers in the world doesn't mean that everything that's happening is from those beings exerting that power. And we see this in the ancient world where, they look at the moon, they look at an eclipse, and they just, everything at that point in time for the human existence is so doused in superstition and fear and not knowing what's going on exactly, that everything becomes pinned to a particular god or power or spiritual force of some kind. And as we know now, that's not true. However, in one sense, these things are spiritual powers. They are, the natural world is being moved by physics, by atoms, by forces that are, for lack of a better term, they're magical in their own way. The natural sciences of the universe are indeed magical in a lot of ways. And I'm sure most people understand what I mean by that. And so I think that when Gimli, asserts that this storm is being caused um, by a greater power, I think that's fear. I think this is the caveman version that a tidal wave coming is because they've sinned too much and eaten too many coconuts, and that's why Guam is going to be overrun by a giant tidal wave. That kind of a
So
belief.
your view is that Gimli and the dwarves in general, in believing that the mountains are speaking to them, it's a bit of local superstition.
Well, I think it's local superstition, but I think there's a reason for it. I mean, if we think about dwarves, what do they really, really know about weather patterns? I mean, this is like a third grader trying to discuss, how to water ski. They don't really understand what's really going on. Their traditions are not, um, and their lore, their things are not about weather patterns. Yes, this is about a mountain. It's a large mountain, but when it comes to snow and weather patterns, this isn't something that is necessarily what you might call in the wheelhouse of Aule or the people of Aule, which are the dwarves. And I just don't see a direct translation. I think that the weather patterns are going to be confusing to them. And when things are confusing to humans, dwarves, firstborn, whatever, and not understanding something powerful, the
That,
very first thing people do
that's where
is run home.
folklore is born.
Yes,
And,
that's where it's born. But it's
and,
also
and
but it's also
superstition.
based, yeah, superstition. It's all, but folklore and superstition, a lot of it, not all of it, is often based in fear and not understanding. And I think when a statement like that comes from a dwarf, it's not understanding quite that this is just the way that this really is. I mean, and in case in point, you don't have any of the fellowship say anything, or there's no narrative that discusses that this view is shared by anybody else. They just hear it and they kind of go, well, I mean, this is Caradhras. I mean, this is one of the biggest mountains in Middle Earth, and to say that this time of the year there isn't going to be, even at the high pass, there isn't going to be a weather issue, even a storm to that degree.
It is
Just by
January,
it is
Yeah.
yes, it is January,
Yeah.
and to say that that's being done on purpose to stop their transit when you're crossing, Mount Rainier or Mount Everest or K2 or whatever, and there happens to be a storm, your Sherpa guide is going to look at you and try to speak to you in English and say, "Are you on crack? This happens every other day here. I mean, this is not Saruman making a spell. Not Saruman, but this is not anything superstitious other than a weather pattern that is typical to this place, especially this time of year." So I think that in the end, and kind of in my little conclusion here, of getting to the end of when I'm at my time here, is our weather patterns happening on their own in Middle Earth, under the ocean, and in the mountains, and everywhere in between? Absolutely, yes. Are there some beings in the Maya category and the Vala, which involves Morgoth and Manwë for specifics, are capable of changing weather? Absolutely, yes. Are any of the beings in the Lord of the Rings, in the Fellowship, powerful enough to change weather patterns? I do not personally believe so.
Let me break in here just for two things. One is I would bring up Osse because he was big into storms, although that was out at sea. He wouldn't be causing a storm at Caradhras. The other is a little bit of support from the chat here. David here points out that the Scottish mountain Ben Nevis is often translated as Nibhes, which means malicious. So even in life, we will sometimes personalize things like mountains and speak of the will of the stone and
Yep.
say that a
Yep.
mountain might be malicious, and that doesn't necessarily, translate to reality. It is just something that we create out of fear. Sid, you have something to say as well.
I have two questions for Matt. You just said that there's no one in the Lord of the Rings who can manipulate weather in this way. And I think there's one exception to that, but it's very different. And so Sauron activates Mount Doom to create ashen cloud cover so that the orcs can fight in the daytime in the siege of Minas Tirith. So it's very clear that Sauron at least could do something as big as what happened at Caradhras, in fact, even bigger. But there's no reason to think he did this one. Would you agree?
Well, I would agree with that,
Yeah.
except, not except. I agree with what you're saying completely. I was going to get to that in a little bit. But what I'm trying to focus on here is Caradhras, and we had a conversation about this a few days ago, Sid, which is, when we're talking about Caradhras, we're talking about
Wait, Matt,
the element.
just because we're going to be discussing this topic for a few hours, say it with me. Caradhras.
Caradhras.
There, you got it. Nailed it. Okay.
Okay. Anyway, what I'm saying here is when we're speaking of mountains, we're talking, and about these kind of weather storms, we're talking about elemental purviews of the two most powerful of the Valar besides Melkor, and that is Manwë with wind, air, and Ulmo with water. And when you have snow and you have wind, which snow is water and air, it's the H2O thing. The elemental purview of these Valar are very clearly made about who controls this kind of thing. And while I agree that Morgoth and Sauron have the ability to bring things that are dead and ugly and all those kinds of things to the places that they lived in Fauglith and Angband and Sauron with Mordor and all that. I totally agree with what Sid is saying. However, when it comes to this weather pattern, I don't believe that those two, or especially Sauron at least, would have that much power or know enough at that point to make a storm. Either way, he didn't know enough, and he didn't have that kind of power over those types of elements in Middle Earth. It's just not his boogie.
I want to jump in and back you up here. Well, first of all, I want to say that I agree that it's not Sauron because, how would he know to specifically target Caradhras at that exact time? Dizzy in the chat mentioned also that people often refer to bad weather on mountains as the mountain being angry. It doesn't necessarily mean that the mountain has a mood. It's just the way that we as people act. And you mentioned this sort of melding of two different Valar there, Manwë and Ulmo, but there's actually three because Melkor is in there too. Because to get a snowstorm, you don't just need water and wind, you also need cold. And cold was something that was definitely Melkor's purview, and even, Iluvatar himself said that the bitter cold brought Ulmo and Manwë closer together as brethren because of snow and the beauty of it. Of course, snow can be destructive and inconvenient as it is for the Fellowship here. But I just want to say that, we do have Maiar that create weather issues, and we've seen it, and even orcs can do things like what Sauron did, like in the Hobbit. They managed to blot out the sun by controlling a swarm of bats to blot out the sun. So we can see sort of imitations of nature through what Tolkien would refer to as the machine. Osse, if they were trying to cross a river and there was a terrible storm, I would say, well, that's absolutely Osse. But this isn't near a stream or a lake. I mean, yes, there's a river going under the mountain, but that didn't cause the storm. So your view is sort of like sometimes a storm is just a storm, and perhaps the Fellowship, I wouldn't say arguing, but just discussing amongst themselves what caused that is not that similar from people who are in fear, who always need to look for a reason when sometimes it really is just a storm.
Great. I try to go at this a little more logically deductive, we think about the beings that could pull this off. We just addressed the Sauron one. Morgoth is not present. And we don't have any evidence that Manwë is making this happen outside of the natural forces at that time of year in the middle of winter for that mountain. And the other one that is the only other being I think that's close, that's possible, is the Balrog itself, who at this particular time we have no reason to believe that it knows any more than Sauron does that the Fellowship is in the future going to reroute its path and go down from the mountain and then go through Moria. So he has no clue at all. He's probably sleeping and hibernating at this very moment. And nor do I think the Balrog has any of that kind of elemental power over the weather, for much the same reason that I said that Sauron doesn't. This is a fire demon. He doesn't have the kind of elemental control or level of power, in my opinion, that would affect water and wind and basically water and wind. And that's what really this is about as far as this storm is concerned.
Sid.
So, yeah.
Sid has something to say.
Yeah, I said before I had two questions, and this would be a good time to introduce my second one. Matt, accepting your view, how far would you carry this? And I want to give you two specific examples of events just before Caradhras. When the Crebain, the large crows from Dunland, fly over, do you think those are Saruman's spies? Or do you think a wind from the coast blew some Crebain in their direction and they just happened to be flying over?
Just to say, before anybody in chat gets on us, it is Crebain, by the way.
Crebain. Okay, I apologize.
It's okay.
I say Crebain, but the Crebain is a different situation because these are animals of the world that would be able to be affected, or at least have an alliance with Saruman. And I believe that,
and we do know that Radagast taught him how to communicate with birds.
Yeah, we also know that the thrushes are able to speak. So we have several sources. We've just named three in the last couple seconds, but we have several sources that support that the birds had intelligence. They could speak. They could communicate. They could make alliances, and that there's also evidence that in the passages that says that these were working with, to whatever degree, maybe not as a army necessarily, but they were tattlers. They were going to tattle on who was coming this way because they wanted treats. For all we know, this is how birds can be.
What of the wolves? Do you think that there is something deeper going on there? Because the wolves seem to be the final decision maker to get them into Moria.
I think the wolves are just like dogs in a lot of ways. I mean, they're loyal to whoever is feeding them, is ever feeding them the arm of some elf that they found someplace. I mean, they just want to be fed, and I think that they can be trained. I think they're probably as trainable or more trainable than the Crebain. So, do
you think that these were ordinary wolves, or do you think that these were wargs? Because we never see them, we only hear them.
Well, the ones that are the ones, I think that there was possibly both. I mean, if you think about a wolf being raised by a bunch of orcs, they're not going to care. I mean, they're going to be maybe not treated well, but they're going to be fed and taken care of to a certain degree. If they were werewolves, Tolkien is usually more specific about calling out the actual presence or the use of a werewolf. Those aren't very common. They're very difficult to make. They don't just get bred. There's a trapped spirit in there, which is another whole topic. So they're not as common as the wolves. But I think that both rideable wolves and wargs were also a part of all of this, all of these armies.
Okay, two things. One is that Sid does have something to say, and I'm going to give it to you in a second. Laurel's in the chat. Hello, Laurel. I just wanted to share something from the chat because I think it's cute. Chewy gave us a little bit of verse here. The weather outside is weather, and we climb this rock together. And since it's so gosh darn cold, let us try our luck down in the hole. That's really clever. I'm really enjoying that. And Sun Fury here. Pointing out that ravens could also speak. But what's interesting is that in The Hobbit, we deal a lot with birds that can speak human language, but Saruman specifically knows how to speak bird language, which is a skill taught to him by Radagast the Brown. And hello there, everybody that's coming in. I'm sorry I'm not stopping to say hello to everybody. I don't want to interrupt too much.
I want to say that's a excellent point. The Astari wizards, including Gandalf, all have the ability to talk to animals, and so it's not so much that the Crebain have an ability to speak or to communicate, which I think they kind of do. But I think they can communicate real easily with a wizard that's able to actually understand what they're saying.
Yes. And I'm going to get to you in a moment, David. But Sid, go ahead.
Okay. At this point, I have three crucial things to say because I've been cut off a couple times. One, here's a point where, Matt, I really agree with you. And it's a beautiful passage of text where something high and dark flies over the Fellowship after the Crebain.
Crebain, yeah. Like Dunedain. Like Dunedain.
Yeah, thank you. After the Crebain. And the best reading of it is actually the first sighting of a Nazgul on a winged beast, but no one has any idea what it is. And in a conversation between Frodo and Aragorn, Frodo says, could it have just been a cloud? And Aragorn says, only if it was flying against the wind. Mm-hmm. So this kind of meticulous look at physically what is going on, and therefore could it be physical, that you brought up as a way to look at the book, is something that actually occurs in the book as well. But the other point I want... No, please.
Wait, hold on, he has two other things.
Yeah. But the other point I want to say is, please take a closer look. We are told to trust Aragorn's perceptions. Gandalf says that. And Aragorn specifically says, those are the howls of wargs. Mm-hmm. And Aragorn knows the difference between a warg and a wolf. And also... after they fight them and kill some of them with arrows, there are no bodies.
Laurel just brought up that exact thing in chat as well, Sid.
Yeah, so I know whether that's Sauron or Saruman, I'll cover in my own part, but I do think that has to be an evil magical event.
There's definitely something... Yeah, I mean, we could agree in this section at least that the storm is a storm, but the wolves... whether they were meant to be represent wargs or ordinary wolves, seems to be some sort of foul magic. Now, David here brings up an interesting thing, is that perhaps there is an analog here between The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings as a literary device to get the characters to go under a mountain, whereas in The Hobbit it was the mountain giants, often referred to as the giants of the stone or the stone ents, were a danger that forced them into a cave, and then they wound up traveling under a mountain. And here we have a mixture of Crebain and wolves and a storm, all basically saying, not that way, not that way, not that way. No, there's only one route, and it's Moria.
Okay, I got it. Now, claiming my period, I want to address what he just said.
And Gollum is present in both, by the way, that David just said.
Yeah. They are connected for sure. Almost like what's it called? Chekhov's gun. What's it called?
Chekhov's gun. Yes.
Chekhov's gun. They're making a winged appearance. A winged shadow is making an appearance as Chekhov's gun, as a forbearing warning of what's going to happen later on. And I agree with that completely. That is probably, almost certainly, a Nazgul, winged Nazgul, as this shadow. But when I was asked whether I thought this was wargs or wolves, I stand by my answer. However, the passage is also clear and convincing. These were wargs, and yes, Aragorn would know the difference. And so this particular group was probably what you would call, the first string team, which are these wargs that were bred for these kinds of purposes and for riding. However, I still think that there's enough evidence that says that that wolves were also trained, but they weren't quite as large and they weren't quite as evil as the wargs were. So I agree with what he's saying.
You're getting a lot of backup right now from the chat, Matt. I want to point out that Sun Fury and as well as Deborah, who sends me a lot of questions on Quora, thank you, Deborah, are saying that perhaps the wolves recovered their own dead, and knowing what we know from The Hobbit of their level of intelligence and organization, I would have to see that not only is that possible, but it agrees with what you're saying, Matt.
That goes back to a tradition in Norse mythology related to a book that was written many years ago called Eaters of the Dead, which was a movie that came out under the title The 13th Warrior. And if nobody has seen that movie, they should see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, they should see that.
I didn't care for the film, but I'm familiar with the book. Sid had something to say.
This is exactly the kind of conversation I hoped would happen, so thank you. And one more point is, I hope I haven't lost it. Give me a moment. Parallels to The Hobbit. In The Hobbit, Gandalf is about to end his own life by leaping from a tall tree, burning as many wargs and orcs as he can, knowing he will die. And here, in this moment of the warg attack, Gandalf does exactly the same thing. He leaps forward. He ignites all the trees around him. In The Hobbit, they were already burning. This time, he makes them all burn. And he launches a successful attack, and that is almost identical to the unsuccessful attack he nearly launched in The Hobbit.
I want to supplement what you're saying, Sid. I think that the better analog is not so much that because the him leaping or preparing to leap as a fireball down from the trees in The Hobbit happened after they had traveled under the mountains. So I think actually sacrificing himself in battle with the Balrog is the analog there.
I would say both, but I'll come back to that.
I want to bring in something that's new, and I think Sid and John, you're going to love this. In the Eaters of the Dead, the tradition of taking one own's dead was an assignment of the group of the army, or the number of people who go out on this mission. That there are people who are assigned to go in and take the dead. They're there as part of the attack, but when they see one of their own guys fall, there's two people who come up and take that person immediately away, so that they don't fall into the hands of the enemy. Now, the reason for this is what's called out there extreme moral polarity. And when you have opposing forces, especially in Tolkien's Legendarium, that are from the absolute ends of the spectrum, you have this extreme moral polarity, which is black and white. In other words, and we have evidence of this, that the orcs have traditions, and it's discussed in the Silmarillion that they are afraid that the elves are going to take their dead or eat them, and they get caught by the elves in encampments, and they are very afraid of men and elves, even dwarves to a certain degree, of their fallen friends. Even if they're orcs and they're wargs and all that, they're very afraid of their friends being eaten by the enemy, the evil enemy, which are the elves and the men. And that's how polar opposite these two sides see each other in this extreme moral polarity. They will save the dead bodies of their orc or warg buddies so that they do not fall into the hands and get eaten by or tortured by the evil elves. I mean, that's how far apart they are.
Let me back you up on this, because I'm going to say two things that are going to agree with that. One is they have every reason to be afraid, as we see in the Two Towers, when all of the orc bodies are consumed by the Huorns after the Battle of Helm's Deep. And the other thing is that if these wargs are agents of Saruman, we also learn later, once again in the Two Towers, that he is a big liar and tells the people of Dunland about the cruelty of the Rohirrim and how they take prisoners and torture them and burn them alive and all these sorts of terrible things. And it is through discovering how magnanimous in victory the Rohirrim are, and how all they ask is for the conquered force to help clean up the battlefield and give up their weapons, and then they'll be allowed to go home to their families, is how they turn against Saruman. So yeah, absolutely. The evil overlords always say these things, that yes, the elves are evil. They're going to eat you. They're going to torture you. They're going to do all sorts of terrible things. Sid?
Two very quick items. One is that we've noted that Saruman could speak in the language of birds. Now add his voice. I don't think Saruman would have any problem commanding the Crebain to go out, spy on anything in that part of the world, and report back. So every time you look at what Saruman might be doing, I'd say think about his voice. The other thing I would say is the thing we were just talking about extensively in magical stories is also very real in our world. There is a United States military theme, especially in the Marines and Special Forces.
Deborah brought this up in the chat earlier.
Yeah. No Man Left Behind.
Yes.
And it became crucial during the Vietnam War when we had tens of thousands of unknown, were they prisoners of war, were they missing in action? And at that time, we also had a tremendous disgust about the Japanese kamikaze, where it's one thing to go on a mission where you might lose your life. But there's something very wrong and twisted about a nation of soldiers who go on missions where they know they're going to die. But if you get into the history, and this is way off, so I'm just mentioning it, it is actually true that the Americans have also sent our own men on kamikaze missions. And so our view of the enemy is often distorted, believing they do the worst of what we do. And Saruman is like that too.
So being a member of the military, I'll tell you that there's another aspect of this is two sides of the coin. One of them is depending on the enemy. But if the enemy is particularly feared, especially with their disinterest in human rights, the half you're talking about of this coin is to not be left to fall into enemy hands. But the other half is the confidence that if you get wounded, the fear level can be reduced because of the fact that if you get wounded, your buddies will make every effort to pull you out, and that helps you. Is separate from the fear of being captured. It's the idea that you're going to be cared for and taken care of, and that you would do the same thing for other people. So there are two different things here.
Agreed.
All right, let's try to step a little bit away from getting too close to current events here. Although shout out to Deborah, who did bring up the same idea that Sid had in the chat there. I didn't have the chance to read that, but Sid happened to bring it out here. Also, Sun Fury, I wasn't trying to ignore you. It just happens that you basically typed what I was saying, so I sort of covered that bit about Dunland. Okay, so I think that for your section here, Matt, we've got a great amount of evidence that points to backing up your view of the storm really just being a storm, that it really isn't that unusual for there to be a storm in a high mountain in January in that part of the world. Now, let's move over to the five questions that you've chosen to answer here.
How much time would you like me to spend?
Well, like I said, we're not just as much as you need, really. Within reason. You're doing great.
Okay. Sid, are you happy?
I'm happy. A caution to viewers, I must take tiny snacks tonight for my health. I apologize.
I'm planning to have like brief little interludes, like after Matt's section is complete, before I take mine. We'll take like a little brief because I'll have to, go to the bathroom perhaps and such. So you'll have a chance.
I'll hold to them as much as I can.
Okay.
Okay. The five I selected, I'll just name them real quick. I'm going to discuss the aspects of where the Watcher came from, Pippin's dropping of the rock, Balin's tomb, and the situational awareness around that. The fourth one will be Orc and Troll, and what the situation for command and control was under the Balrog in Moria. And then the fifth one is the escape from Moria. And
Laurel,
there's
Laurel says, "You're giving Matt no limits." None of us are having limits. It's all within reason. You know what I mean? And especially since the reason that we normally have limits is so that Sid could end when he needs to end. But since Sid is going last and doing the outro, it's not such a big deal today. But okay, Matt, and like I said, not spending like a whole lot of time on each. What are your views on each of these? Going down the line.
And the listeners and Laurel just say this is kind of like a super section kind of a format. So there's kind of like super sections going on, and then it's going to move on to the other guys here for their own sections. Okay, first one, the Watcher in the Water. Well, I think that's probably Exhibit A for one of the nameless things that came into the world and took a physical form. And I've used this term before. But there's a thing out there called the neutral belligerent, and this is kind of like anglerfish and sharks and things like that. They're not really evil. They just.
Are you saying that it's sort of akin to like Old Man Willow, in a way? It's an obstacle in their path. It's a bit malevolent, but not necessarily aligned with the devil.
Right. I think it would eat a hobbit as fast as it would eat an orc. Maybe orc a little faster, but. Anything with an axe probably wouldn't do very well. It wouldn't matter if it was Tinkerbell or whether it was Manway. I mean, of course, I don't mean Manway. Manway would be able to speak to it just fine. But my point is that this concept of neutral belligerence is a real term out there. They just do what they do. They have a very simple attention span. They have 4 or 5 operating modes, and it's just what they do. And we take it personal when they try to eat us, but they're just thinking about the fact that they may not eat for the next 5 or 6 months, or they're going to eat. They're going to eat you now. Nothing personal, just business. I mean, that's the famous, mafia term.
I've had a similar view actually on Shelob. That Shelob is really just food motivated and not necessarily an agent of Morgoth or anything like that, managed to get a little bit flattered by Gollum, who promised her food and, probably told her she's a very pretty spider and everything. And I think that, like, as far as the Watcher is, it's probably an even more simple creature who probably doesn't even understand human speech. So so I mean, I guess the big mystery here that Sid was asking though is there significance to the fact that it went for Frodo as was suggested by some of the characters, or was it just that he was that close?
Well, that's what I was going to get at. I had a right way to put this. I don't totally disagree with you or totally agree with what you said about Shelob. I think she's south of neutral belligerent. What I mean is, I think she's on the evil side, just because of who her mother is. Her mother is Ungoliant, and I don't think that Ungoliant is a neutral belligerent necessarily either. But at the same time, I don't think that Shelob and the Watcher in the Water are both the same kind of thing, really. I just think that there's enough evidence that says that these creatures existed in the world at the foundations of the world's creation. They take physical form and they do what they do. So, having said that, the ring issue is, how to put this? Okay, if you're a shiny little object at the base of the Marianas Trench and you're an anglerfish, and you don't see very many shiny objects down there, and you see one come through, you're going to be checking that out. Okay? Now, of all the shiny objects that there were, I think that because Sauron has so much of his power and his actual Theia tied into the ring, I think that smells like a chocolate chip cookie to a third grader. And I think that the Watcher of the Water, being an ancient being of the earth, has some kind of sense. I wouldn't say it's necessarily smell, but I would say in the second plane sense that there's some kind of being, some kind of power in something that Frodo is holding on to. Now we know that he's holding on to the ring,
The
and
wheel
we know that
is this
Sauron.
the wheel of fire that Sam sometimes sees in the Return of the King? That perhaps the Watcher is seeing the wheel of fire, and it doesn't know the significance of the One Ring or the power behind it, but it's just like there's something bright and unusual, and I'm gonna check it out.
Yes, bright in the sense of not necessarily a ring. It being the Watcher is not seeing a ring at my imagination.
Mm-hmm.
My imagination is that he is able to spiritually smell something of power, and he knows which being has it, because with all these legs and the way that these things are described, it's obviously a grabbing, tearing, pulling kind of a being. So he's going to have absolute control over its limbs, and he's going to know exactly which being it wants to grab. He's not going to have, it's not going to be complicated for that to go after Frodo. And I don't think going after Frodo is an accident, because of what he's carrying. And I think that was the most interesting so-called spiritually shiny object at that moment.
A lot of what you're saying is backed up by another phrase that's repeated all through all three novels, which is that the ring can sense evil, and evil can sense the ring.
Yes, and that's why I think that neutral belligerents might be on the edge of what they might be able to sense in that realm, because they're not necessarily good. They don't really necessarily have what you call a naivete, blindness to these kinds of powerful items. But when you're in that kind of middle realm, which is this neutral belligerent area, and you're a powerful being yourself that's been around since the beginning of time, I think that's enough for you to be able to, like I said, smell it in the other plane. There's something there, and he wants it.
I think we have enough on that one. Just to give what Laurel said, that Laurel
Sure.
points out that the person who says that it's curious that it went for Frodo was Gandalf. It's not like this was something that Boromir or Sam said. Okay, so
Well, thank you.
you know,
Moving on to Pippin.
yeah, move on to Pippin.
Pippin dropping the rock. I believe this just represents the foolishness that comes from
From
really
youth.
isolated life and naivete, just general naivete.
Yeah. Well, he's a rich kid. He's
He's a rich kid,
aristocrat.
but it also applies to people who just aren't from that part of the world. Let's say they just think, well, why would anybody want to steal my wallet? And it's like, well, you're in the Philippines, bro, at midnight.
Yeah,
I mean, what is
yeah.
your problem, right? And so
Anywhere you'd go, somebody might want to steal your wallet, right?
right.
But
I don't
like you
mean
said,
the
it's
Philippines.
no. But you're right. Like
mean-
it's a naive sort of view, and Pippin is a child, which people tend to forget, and he is playing the role of the fool here.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, I don't mean to make this an analogy, but it's an instructive point here. When you're going through Moria and you're a hobbit, that's like that's like a 14-year-old visiting
Kosovo or something, right?
Kandahar, looking for a popsicle at midnight. I mean, that's not going to go well. All right. And they don't really understand that, and there's no way for them to understand it. So my point is that Tolkien is really in sharp contrast, showing this goofing around, this normal little. He doesn't really understand really what's at stake. Doesn't understand what it is. Doesn't understand cause and effect analysis. Like, if I do this, this could happen, and that'll happen. And why do I? He's just messing around like he normally does in a normal life. But Tolkien is describing it this way to show us that many people in these situations of life and death and of serious nature do not come to grips with really what's going on. They're in a constant state of non-preparedness and non-reality about what's really happening in the world when really things really get weird. Now, I will point out the last thing here is the cost of this naivete in dropping the bucket down and warning everybody that they were there.
It was just a stone.
Is also the power of naivete. The power of this simple person doing a silly thing caused several events to happen. First, they were found. There was combat. There was Gandalf falling into the abyss with the Balrog. There was the conflict between he and the Balrog, where
Hey, Alice.
Gandalf goes and becomes and is returned as Gandalf the White, which had to be something that had to happen. Had that bucket not fallen in based on this precursor event of the bucket falling in.
Wait, I don't know why you're saying bucket. Where's bucket coming from?
Well, what did he drop down?
It was a rock.
I'm sorry, the rock.
Yeah, rock.
The rock. That's right. The movie was the bucket, but the rock dropped down, and that rock. It's interesting. It's a rock. The rock that goes tumbling down creates a snowball, an avalanche of other events that would not have happened. The events that happened after that needed to happen for Gandalf to become Gandalf the White. It needed to happen for the Fellowship to go on its own and break up, because of the grief that was caused by what happened to Gandalf. It was one of the main reasons why he just wanted to go off on his own outside of Boromir trying to take it from him. But
to put it simply, you're saying this is another example of what you talked about earlier of Chekhov's gun as a literary device.
I think it was a literary device, but what I'm really saying is that the power of naivete, the power of the simple people doing things also can take a turn for what's necessary, for what's actually necessary to have happen. Otherwise, Gandalf would have been Gandalf the Grey the whole time. They would have escaped. Now, Gandalf probably wants to escape, but in the end, Gandalf had to become white for many other reasons, as we saw. So, moving on, that's my comment about that one.
Yeah.
Balin's tomb, the situational awareness to that was one of my favorite scenes when he's reading, what happened to Balin. Everyone knows that's the white-haired, crazy-haired guy from The Hobbit. That was him. Just the fact that they were going to be cut off, and they knew this was the location in which they were going to be cut off in, was really cool. Situational awareness at the time. And but the and that little, I don't really have anything to really say there, except that Balin's tomb is at a position there that allows them to be cut off, and the orcs and trolls, which is my item number 4, being under the command of the Balrog and driven by the fear of it, is both. The Balrogs are probably more experienced, actually, in commanding orcs in the field or anywhere they are, equal to probably Sauron.
Yeah, and I want to back that up, because Sauron is like the 4-star general, whereas the Balrogs are like the field commanders that actually go out and
brigadier generals. Yeah. They're the one, and so this is going to be second nature to him. This Balrog and down there is going to be able to communicate his orders to them telepathically. That's going to freak the trolls out and the orcs out, even the big orcs, and he's got total command of the situation down there in that pit. There is no way he doesn't. There's no evidence that he doesn't know exactly what's going on, and has given basically standing orders for who's going to come and go and when to wake me up and when not to wake me up. That whole deal. He's also going to be able to hear and feel things himself. He's a very powerful Maya himself. So nothing's escaping his attention, or what should have his attention throughout this period of time. And yes, they're under his command, and yes, they're very afraid of the Balrog. And I think that's what's going on with the trolls and the orcs there. Now, leads to number 5, the escape from Moria. I'm kind of focusing this on the fact that once the Balrog knew that they were there, I think the Balrog knew more of what Frodo was holding on to than the Watcher in the Water was. I think he had a sense of there's a whiff of somebody I know from way past when. Again, focusing on the fact that it's a fact that the ring has the power and the Fea of Sauron in it. Now, a Maya is going to be able to sense that, especially one as evil as a Balrog. This is going to be like, dude, I smell my best friend Kevin. And that's the way my best friend Kevin smells, bro. Not my best friend either. The guy I really don't want to have to meet again, but that's Sauron. That
A
smells like
bit of
Sauron.
a bit of nostalgia for the Balrog.
Yeah, a whiff of the old place. And I think that he senses that, and I think that he also knows, and I think Gandalf fully knows, that if he does not confront the Balrog there, besides his holy mission or his mission in the cosmos to take on this being, I think he knows that the gig is up, and that the Balrog knows that that there's something to follow. The Balrog has no trouble leaving Moria at all. He's not afraid of the sun. These guys operated in sun, daylight, doesn't really matter where they operated. And he knows that the Balrogs are fast enough and powerful enough to wipe out the whole company and take the ring. And there is no hiding from the Balrog. If the Balrog wants to leave and hunt you into the edge of Lorien, or even possibly go into Lorien to get the ring, ain't nothing going to stop it.
Two things to back you up here. One is that I wrote something ages ago about somebody asking what would happen if the Balrog came across a Palantir. And I said that's possibly the scariest thing that could happen, because they're intelligent enough to figure out a magical object like a Palantir. And if they saw the state of Middle-earth in the Third Age, Durin's Bane saw the state of Middle-earth in the Third Age, he would feel very comfortable coming out and starting to wreak havoc. And then the other thing is that I mentioned this in an article not too long ago, well, rather in a comment on an article, that bringing anything from the First Age into the Third Age is almost like a nuclear strike. It's so, because the First Age, everything was bigger and badder and more majestic and more horrifying and more wondrous and beautiful, and all the adjectives that Tolkien loved. Everything's so diminished now that this Balrog is so horrifying that it would be like a walking nuclear bomb. They wouldn't be able to stop it once it got out in the open like that.
I mean, can you imagine the discussion between Sauron and a Balrog with two Palantirs between them?
Yeah. I mean, if he got in contact with Sauron, that would be high school reunion right there.
But just the darkness of what's.
Wait, hold on. Sid hasn't said anything for a while, so let's hear from Sid.
Or how about if the Balrog got the ring in Moria? What would happen when a Balrog with a ring confronts Sauron?
I think
not like they're going to buddy up.
I think that's a different topic, because it gets into the whole idea of evil not being cooperative and the Balrog trying to become the Lord of the Rings, and I think it would be capable of challenging Sauron. But it is an interesting thought experiment, you know.
Just for tickling the answer, I'll give 15 words on that real quick. I think that Sauron over time wins that mental, spiritual domination duel, and the ring eventually back to Sauron, and at that point the Balrog is going to be a servant of Sauron at that point.
Okay, so Matt, wonderful views. Obviously, like I said, I don't necessarily agree with everything, and I'm sure Sid doesn't necessarily agree with everything, but we were treating it as if we're just going to back Matt up, and because we have our own sections to talk about our own views. I'm going to go over to a different screen here very briefly, which is a brief respite here, if I could find it, because I've got to take a very brief bathroom break. And hello there, Jonathan. Thank you for catching a live. Just anything you need, if you need to eat something, or real quick, just 2 minutes here. I'll be right back.
So this commercial break is being brought to you by the Green Dragon. Find one close to you, have a pint, and don't worry about too much more after that. Again,
Matt, the last things you were saying are really interesting, because our views are in some ways diametrically opposed, even while I admire and support yours. But the last things you were talking about, starting when you mentioned the consequences of Pippin's, quote, foolish dropping of the rock, I'm going to come back to that in my presentation, and you're already making the whole idea that we can disagree and grow our stories together while keeping them different is really, really working. So thank you.
Welcome, Sid. I'm glad you're seeing it all blossom. The only other thing I was going to say was, let's see, Sauron bringing the ring, Balgruuf, Moria. I just think the more and more I think about this, Gandalf knew they weren't going to have a chance to resist the Balrog, and the Balrog was going to catch them all.
Okay,
he's just too fast of a being to be outrun.
Okay, so we're going to
absolutely.
Oh well, we've talked extensively about the speed of Balrogs, and they're ridiculously quick. So we're back in business here.
Since you mentioned that, yeah, there's a fascinating exception to it. After the Balrog's fire goes out in the depths of the waters under Moria, he's a beast of slime with no fire, and it takes him and Gandalf days to climb Zirac-Ziggle.
I think part of that is that they're fighting, though.
No, I think it's the slime, because then they break out, the sun is out, the Balrog bursts back into flame. And I'm going to suggest that this is the only case where a Balrog lost his flame, and we know it took him days. I'm going to suggest the speed of a spiritual fire being comes with fire.
I would agree with that. I would say that there is one other instance of a Balrog losing its flame, is that Ecthelion drew one underwater and killed it in that fashion.
Agreed.
Although the more detailed account of that is the Book of Lost Tales Part 2, which I know people like to throw around words like canon, not canon. If it doesn't contradict the Silmarillion, we could consider it canon, although I'm not a fan of arguing about that sort of thing. I say there's no canon, there's just classics, sort of like the Arthurian legend. There are a lot of different takes on it. All right, so now we're going to move on to my section. So, like I said, for the entirety of Matt's section, we all backed him up, we all agreed, and found evidence for him, even if we didn't. It wasn't our particular view, and now we're all going to do that for me, I guess. Yes, it was indeed Gothmog, Sunfury. It was indeed Gothmog. So let's talk about my view. So my view of the and Alice just backing me up on the whole idea of the idea of canon being sort of anti-art. It is anti-expression in a lot of ways, similar to the ideas of power scaling and how limiting that makes it when we speak about these sort of things in literature. Just to bring up something that did come up in chat, none of us live near the Green Dragon, but I think one of us has a mug that says the Green Dragon on it. Do you have it?
I don't have it with me.
Okay. Yeah. You don't have it on with you. There you go. Okay.
I mean, why shouldn't every single city have a prancing pony and a Green Dragon pub? I mean, seriously.
Yeah. Well, they were in two different places, but you got to have at least one or the other, right? The Green Dragon, of course,
Just find out how far they were apart from each other in the books.
Not very far.
And somebody go out there and make one exactly a couple miles from each other and just get on with the franchise.
I was about to say our age adds franchises to Middle Earth.
Let's just have some fun. I mean, come on.
Okay. The Balrogs are incarnate, Deborah, so that's part of like why they are the way they are. But anyway, let's and just to clarify that the Green Dragon is a pub in Bywater, which is very close to Hobbiton. It's just to the east of Hobbiton, and of course the Prancing Pony is in Bree, which is the first sort of city that you run into when you come out of the Shire and Buckland to the east there. All right, so my view of... We'll start with the storm. And I also have something to talk about specifically relating to something that Gandalf said in the Fellowship of the Ring that I was going to jump in and say it if it would help Matt. It turns out that it helps anybody. I think this helps anybody's view. It didn't specifically help Matt. It doesn't specifically help me either. And I will talk about that as well. So I do not believe that the storm was just a storm. And there are a few reasons why I choose not to believe that it was just a storm. Of course, it is not unusual for a storm to happen in January in that sort of altitude and that sort of climate. However, it is most curious that as soon as they make the decision that they're not going to continue onwards, the storm immediately abates. It doesn't even wait for them to get off of the mountain. As soon as they say that they cannot go any further and that they must retreat and not take the pass of Caradhras, the storm abates. Another reason is that this pass over Caradhras has a history of absolutely terrible things happening to people who cross over it. One of them was Elrond's wife, Celebrian, who was kidnapped by orcs and tortured and poisoned and all sorts of terrible things. And she was rescued by her sons, her twin sons, Elladan and Elrohir. And she was healed physically by her husband Elrond, who's possibly the greatest healer in all of Middle-earth, but the mental scars remained, and she wound up sailing to the west, much as Frodo sailed to the west because of his mental scars at the end of The Lord of the Rings. So there is sort of a negative, I think, vibe going around Caradhras. However, in this specific instance, I don't think that the storm was necessarily malevolent, because my view is that this storm was caused by none other than Iluvatar, God himself, Eru, as he is called in the Undying Lands, the One, Iluvatar, as he is called in Middle-earth, the All-Father. Now, I know it sort of seems like almost like a bit of a cop-out to say, well, God did it, right? But there are a few things that point to this being the case. We know from his letters, and I mentioned this in chat a little while ago, is that Tolkien referred to Iluvatar specifically as the character within The Lord of the Rings that is always present, yet never named. Nobody brings up Iluvatar. Faramir sort of alludes to the One, and that's about as far as it goes. He's not named within the story. However, he is always present. It is Tolkien's view that Iluvatar was the reason that Gollum fell into Samath Naur, and it is my view that it is the reason that this storm prevented them from taking that pass. Now, somebody in chat earlier spoke up and said that there was an analog between The Hobbit and the Fellowship of the Ring, and that in both cases certain events conspired to force the protagonists to take the path under, or rather through, the mountain rather than going over it, which is what happened in The Hobbit. Of course, that led to the moment of Bilbo discovering the One Ring. And in this case, it led to a lot of different things happening, including the fall of Gandalf, which led to the eucatastrophe moment of Gandalf the White returning in the Two Towers. And before you get to that moment of eucatastrophe, you have to go through a lot of really dark stuff. We have the Fellowship being broken, Boromir dies, they believe that Gandalf is gone, they're sort of despondent, Merry and Pippin are captured and dragged off by orcs, everything seems very terrible, and you almost start to wonder, how could anything possibly happen that is good? And then Gandalf is back. And this is the moment where they have to go through Moria. And once again, and this is really brilliant that somebody in the chat said exactly what I was thinking, is that in both instances of the literature forcing the characters to take the lower path under the mountain rather than over it, Gollum is involved. In the case of The Hobbit, of course, he meets Gollum, there's a riddle game, he gets the One Ring. And not that he gets the One Ring from the riddle game, unless you're reading the first edition, but he finds the One Ring, and because he has the ring in his pocket, he's able to win the riddle game, and because of the ring, he's able to escape from a very wrathful sort of Gollum. In this case, Gollum is lurking under under Caradhras. He's in Moria, and he's been there for some time. And it is very important that Frodo specifically walks by Gollum at some point, because Gollum has to start following him. Gollum has a part to play, for good or for ill in the end, and that was a line that Gandalf had in the beginning, in the chapter The Shadows of the Past, which, by the way, was the very first chapter that Tolkien ever wrote, even before he wrote A Long Expected Party. He wrote Shadow of the Past. So that's literally the oldest part of The Lord of the Rings, where Gandalf tells Frodo about the truth of Gollum and his nature and his origin and what he's really like and how actually important he is. And we lead to, once again, the eucatastrophe that Gollum destroys the One Ring. Accidentally, of course, but it is through his actions that Frodo doesn't attempt to become the Lord of the Rings, and that it gets into the fire where it belongs. And that never would have happened if they didn't go through Moria. Gollum would have just stayed there. And I'm going to get into a little bit more about Gollum later when we talk about the 5 questions, but he's there for a reason, and it's not that he's looking for the ring. He's pretty much given up at this point. He's been tortured by Sauron. He's been to Mordor. He doesn't want to see light again. He doesn't want to be outside. And then here comes another Baggins walking by him, and 2 very familiar-looking characters that he's seen, Gandalf and Aragorn, who had captured him and interrogated him previously. So he knows something big is going on, and he starts tailing them, and this is, like I said, it's dominoes. It leads to the destruction of the One. If they didn't go through Moria, the ring doesn't get destroyed. Not even getting into what Sid spoke about earlier, that we don't have Gandalf the White, and Matt said it earlier, we have to have Gandalf the White. He would have been gray the whole time. But more importantly, regardless of what happens in Minas Tirith or in Rohan or at the Black Gate, the ring doesn't get destroyed, and Sauron eventually just wins simply because he has greater resources and he's just more powerful than Gandalf at this point in time. So my view is that we have the always present Iluvatar that is hedging them off. Now, some of these are outside influences. We brought up the Crabine. The Crabine are absolutely something that came from Saruman. We know that he was taught the art of speaking to animals by Radagast, and we know that he used birds for spying. And I agree with what Matt said earlier about that they're just big old tattletales. They're going to say that they saw these guys walking south and that there were 4 hobbits there. The wolves, really interesting, because the wolves are sort of cordoning them off and bringing them to the situation where they absolutely have to go into Moria, because they were debating. They were of different minds. Gandalf was really the only one who really wanted to go through Moria. Nobody else was really enthusiastic about it. Gimli was somewhat interested to find out what happened to his cousins. And Gandalf was happy that a dwarf would be with him because he felt that, Gimli would have a good sense of direction underground, whereas he may not. And this speaks to, I didn't choose it as one of my 5 questions, but one of the questions that Sid asked was, about, it just flew out of my head. It was about their sense of direction and getting lost. But anyway, I think that it has to be God. It has to be Iluvatar, because he's the one nudging them in the correct direction. And it has to do with the Balrog. It has to do with Gandalf the White. It has to do with all of the other members of the Fellowship being sort of led astray in a little bit, because they were looking at Gandalf as the guy that holds all the answers and all the secrets, and he was their guide, and now they're put into the situation where they have to, in a bit, rely on Aragorn, or they have to step up and be leaders in their own rights. They're going to get separated. They weren't always going to all go to Mordor. Certainly Boromir was never going to go there. So they all have to learn to sort of step up and not always rely on Gandalf. And there is the literary device that recently, an article, I compared it to an equation where the Balrog is the negative that cancels Gandalf out for a little while in the story before we get to that moment where he's reintroduced when he's really needed. But more importantly, it really is about Gollum. And I hadn't even thought before just a little while ago about the connection to The Hobbit. That was brought up in chat, is that in both instances, the heroes are forced underground and that Gollum is involved, and then it's mountains, that Gollum was present in the Misty Mountains in both cases. It was a little bit further to the north before, and it was closer to Goblin Town. In this case, it's in Moria, but we know that he's familiar with the Misty Mountains. He likes the Misty Mountains. He likes being underneath them. There's no big yellow face grinning at him all the time and making his skin itch and his eyes water, or whatever it is that happens to Gollum when he's out. He doesn't even really like the moon. He shakes his fist at the moon. Sid has something to say. Go ahead, Sid.
And in particular, when Gollum gives up and fails, he goes under the Misty Mountains.
Yes.
So that's a repeated theme at a larger level.
Yes. And Sun Fury here in the chat brings up one of Tolkien's letters, and I was going to talk about his letters in just a little bit, that if Gollum had become fond of the hobbits, he might have cast himself into the fire with the ring, and but he didn't end up using it. And the idea was actually that if Faramir had not, quite unintentionally driven a wedge between Frodo and Gollum, and they really formed a real bond, that Gollum, who was still consumed with the One Ring, and it was still his whole personality, still would have bitten Frodo's hand off, but that, yes, he would have cast it into the fire with himself, with purpose, specifically to spite Sauron, who he hated, because his hatred of Sauron was greater than his avarice for the One Ring. But of course, Tolkien was viewing that not as a plot thread that he dropped, but as a hypothetical that he entertained in a letter. Now, I want to bring up something about what Gandalf said while they were trying to pass Caradhras. So they didn't just go up and there was a storm and they said, oh, never mind that, and turn around and, go back down. They really tried. And this also plays into why I think it has to be Iluvatar, because the harder they tried, the worse the storm got. And it was when they decided to stop trying that the storm just suddenly stops. Now, there is a point where they take a little bit of shelter in, and you can't even call it a cave, a small indent in the rock where they could just be a little bit out of the cold and the wind and the snow. And the Fellowship begs Gandalf, could we please light a fire? And he says, if anybody's looking for us, they've probably already seen us. We're out in the open. We're just really very visible right now. So if you can manage to get a fire going, knock yourselves out. So they all try, and even Gimli cannot manage to get a fire going. And dwarves are the masters of kindling. They are better than anybody else at starting a fire using what we would call natural means. So what does it wind up happen? Gandalf starts the fire himself. He points at the bundle of wood and he invokes a Sindarin phrase, which I'm going to translate for you. He said, "Fire for our salvation." And that was his word of command. It was a very specific phrasing that Tolkien used, word of command, which is the same thing he uses later within Moria when he tries to use magic to close a door and the Balrog counters his spell and there's a big explosion that nearly destroys the both of them. Word of command. He says, "Fire for our salvation." And the Sindarin word that he uses, the elves had a lot of different words for fire. But the word that he uses is Naur, which in Quenya would be Anor. And then what does he say to the Balrog? "I am a servant of the secret fire." Translation, I'm an angel of God. "I am a wielder of the flame of Anor. My fire is holy." Because the sun is the last living fruit of the great tree of Valinor, Laurelin the Gold, hallowed by Varda and carried in a magical casket through the sky by the Mire spirit Arian, who herself is so radiant and beautiful that she's difficult to look at. He doesn't say, there's a lot of other words that you could use in Sindarin that mean fire or flame. He specifically says Naur, and that is specifically a holy flame. So he is saying holy flame for our salvation. He lights the fire, and then this is what he says, something very interesting, and this is what supports all, not just my theory, but Matt's theory and Sid's, well, I don't even know what Sid's theory is, but whatever Sid's theory is, because this really means that it could have been anybody. He says, I have made a giant sign that says Gandalf is here, which could be viewed from Rivendell to the mouths of the Anduin. And earlier today, I brought up a map, and I made an image of where I overlaid a circle on the map, with the very center of it being Caradhras, and I brought it where the northern bit of the circle hits Rivendell. But then I realized the mouths of the Anduin is pretty far to the south. That's at the Bay of Balfalas in southern Gondor. That has to be included in there too. So when you expand this view, this circle, all of a sudden, it's most of Middle-earth, or at least most of the northwestern portion of Middle-earth that we're familiar with. Even the Black Gate is within that circle. So he's basically saying anybody who's looking, whether it's at the Black Gate or at Isengard or anywhere, if they're looking for me, they have seen me. I have given them a sign. And for good or for ill. And the thing is that Gandalf knows this is a really bad idea, but he still does it. He still does it anyway. And Gandalf sometimes does these things where he does something that seems a little bit foolish, like preparing to destroy himself just to stop a few wargs and to save a few dwarves and one hobbit. That's not really in his mission. His mission is to lead the free peoples of Middle-earth against Sauron, to inspire people to rise up and organize against evil. So sometimes he goes a little bit off script because he really, really cares about all these people. He really cares about all of them, Legolas and Boromir and the hobbits and Gimli and Aragorn, and all of them really. He doesn't want anything bad to happen to them. So he lights a fire, even knowing that from as far as Rivendell or the mouths of the Anduin, and like I said, once you make that into a circle, you're including a lot of bad places. Like I said, a little bit of Mordor. The entirety of Isengard is in that circle. So basically, anybody that was looking would know where Gandalf was at that moment. And I have something else to say about that, but let me go to you, Sid.
Really quick support of what you just said. There's something not much talked about. Galadriel reveals it when she says, I do not know where Gandalf is unless he is in Lothlorien.
This is exactly what I was going to say. Go ahead, though.
And so Gandalf, one question is, if you won't let Glorfindel go on the Nine, why do you let Gandalf? And the answer is, Gandalf is invisible all of the time. Not in the way of wearing a ring, but in the way of being gray. Yeah. It's just his nature to be humble and hidden, and no one can find him. So this moment, coming shortly before the bodily death of Gandalf the Grey, is a total flip of his own script.
Yeah.
I'll say more in my part.
Because sometimes he
support the idea.
He taps into that deeper because, like, let's say, he has started fires before, and he never needed words to do it. He didn't need words to light the acorns in The Hobbit. He didn't need words to light his fireworks. It was always a gesture. He would point, and something would ignite. But in this case,
except for the fact that he might have been saying it to himself in his mind.
No, it said that he issued a word of command.
Right. What I'm saying is
And that is
he may have
what you
he may
refer
have
to as an enchantment. It is a spoken spell. And
that's what
the fact that, and we have to remember that the writing of the Lord of the Rings, this is Frodo's purview. This is what Frodo says that Gandalf said in this moment. So those elvish words.
What I'm saying is, I think there is a spoken command, but I don't think that they always have to be audible when they're given. He could have been igniting these things with a simple elven word in his head as a spoken command, but unspoken. In other words, there's a.
Oh, I see what you're saying, but
yeah, thank you.
The question is, why does he say it out loud in this instance? It's because it's because actually saying a word, that, like I said, that's when it becomes not just magic but enchantment. Enchantment coming from chant, to speak, and it's elvish. What are the elves called? Other than elves, the people of the stars, the Eldar, the Quendi, the speakers. How was the world created? Song, the Ainulindale, music of the holy ones. So
I think that these things are almost emotional, like. When you are what you said about your translations, they're exactly right. And if you're feeling the flame imperishable at that moment for our salvation, you may say it out loud because you're emotionally invested in the incantation, let's call it. But when you're just lighting a bunch of pine cones and tossing them out of a tree, he may be saying them very silently. Another Sindarin different word that means just ignite or something, and he doesn't have to say them out loud because the emotional requirement isn't there to do it. Just a thought. I know.
Remember that we're supposed to be treating what I'm saying is true in this section, just like we treat everybody.
Yeah. I'm not saying it's not true.
Go ahead, Sid.
To take what Matt said and use it to support you, John, I'm going to suggest there are two things, and one is the use of a word as a magical incantation aloud. And the other that comes up with Gandalf the White is the use of a hand gesture. And it has total power. And by the way, the Lord of the Nazgul can do it too. These are signs of maximal power. What I say goes, or what I
is.
Yeah.
And I think that I want to catch up on chat because they're backing you up. Go ahead.
Yeah, one more quick thought. What if the reason Gandalf had to do that is because there was a malevolent force trying to stop them, and he couldn't light a fire without it? So it might be a matter of magical necessity as well.
Well, I don't see the storm as being malevolent. I see it as being a necessary thing that Iluvatar is putting there. But I just want to catch up on chat because there's a few things going on there. On the Twitch side, we got somebody named Jalankinator, who's a first-time chatter, saying, "What is up, Sid, my boy?" So he's a fan of yours, Sid. Now, Sun Fury has pointed out that the secret fire also represents free will because only through the secret fire can beings have free will. So Gandalf is a servant of free will to fight against those who would oppress it. And that plays into what I was saying about he really, really cares about all these people. Now, I see when he issues a word of command, this is something that's very rarely happened. And Sun Fury also said that he was instructed, Gandalf, to suppress his power, to not use his full power in Middle-earth. And he does a few times. In moments of great necessity, and when he really flexes his power and his authority, it comes through as words. Now, I know that you said a gesture does everything, but there is no more powerful thing that Gandalf did as Gandalf the White than shattering Saruman's staff. And that was done with words. He simply said, "Saruman, your staff is broken." And it was so. And that is a little bit of the Ainulindale coming through. The power to change what is based on one's words. To refer to the Silmarillion, we say that Sauron gets into battles and he loses. It happens all the time, right? One time that Sauron personally got into a battle with somebody and really, really dominated was with Finrod, who challenged him to a singing battle, which is not very bright, because this is one of the guys who helped create the universe through singing. So of course Finrod loses that. When you see these Maiar sometimes use their voices in this very special way, it is like a beacon that can be seen all over the world. Now, I know what some people may be thinking. The storm is already happening at this point. But what I am saying is that this is part of the literary device of getting them specifically into Moria, because it is shortly after this that Gandalf says, we can't continue. I don't believe the storm was created by a malevolent being. I don't think that it was the Balrog. I don't think it was Sauron. I don't think, as Peter Jackson thought, that it was Saruman. I think it was Iluvatar, and it was guiding them towards Moria, where Gandalf would meet his first fate, and where Gollum was. More important, Gollum, I think, because Gollum is the key to the Lord of the Rings. He's the only one that could destroy the ring. Frodo could get it there, which is a Herculean task, a monumentally wonderful thing that he got all the way to Sammath Naur, which he couldn't have done without Sam, by the way. So Sam is, I think, equally as heroic and wonderful. But what can two little hobbits do, as brave as they are, against the unstoppable evil of the One Ring at the very seat of its power where it was created? You need that wild card to sort of take the ring off the battlefield, and that was Gollum. And Gollum is where? He's in Moria. You know.
When do we interject our support?
Go ahead now if you want.
Okay,
you could have at any
for
time,
you.
by the way.
Oh no, I was waiting for you to conclude. It's all good.
Okay.
I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I'm trying to find a way to cross the bridge and agree with you on your Eru intercession, and I think I might have found a way that what you're saying could be true, but not maybe in the way that you want to hear it. But it's in support, in my opinion. So I'm going to say it out there anyway. Isn't it true that because of the insertion of Tom Bombadil, when and where he was inserted, that we might at the very least say that he's a derivative power of Eru? A lot of people believe that.
My view is that he absolutely is. In the Silmarillion, it said that the secret fire, also called the flame imperishable, was imparted into the heart of the world by Eru, and that I see Bombadil specifically as a manifestation, not specifically of Eru, but of the secret fire and the land itself of Middle-earth.
So what I'm trying to say here is that I think that all three of us agree with that, and we have. If we went on the passages that support this, it would take literally 5 hours. But if we just conclude right there that he is derivative, not son of necessarily, it's not that way, but derivative, he was placed, he's special. And if we also accept that other people besides Goldberry and Tom, and we take them at their word that they're not liars, any of them, any of the passages, including letter 151 and 133, that Tom is the master of wood, water, and hill, then we can assume that a mountain is a hill. And I could cross the bridge and agree that if anything was going on and was knowing of what was going on, since Tom knew that the ring was called Precious, which always freaks me out, that he knew 100,000 times more than anybody thinks, and that's part of the riddle that's so entertaining for so many people. But if he is the master of wood, water, and hill, and in this particular case, the big hill, if there was an intervention that wasn't just the weather patterns, I would go more with Tom as derivative of Eru in Middle-earth than Eru straight out. That's my only comment. I think you got a brilliant point, but I just wanted to put a little bit of a twist in it for you.
I don't think it was Tom, simply because I don't think he looks beyond the borders that he has set for himself. Because I think that for whatever reason he has decided that this little region is all that matters to him.
Well, true, that could be, but that would
yeah.
mean he's not necessarily the master of wood, which is everywhere, water, which is everywhere, and hill.
Well, I believe that he is master of wood, water, and hill within his own domain. And that if he were to come out of his own domain, he could be the master of wood, water, and hill wherever he may be. But he has chosen.
And he once was.
And he once was, correct.
He chose to limit himself for whatever reason. By the size of his domain.
Yeah, he made the borders of his own devising. They're not a limit put upon him. They're just, this is the area that I care about.
Yeah. So I'm just saying that it's also, if there's evidence that he can choose to be limited, he also can unlimit himself. And that's why he knows the ring is called precious. Yeah. And that's like Eru. He's able to do what he wants to do, is what I'm saying.
I do want to comment on the linguistics there, because the Quenya form of precious is indeed Myron, which is Sauron's real name. So whenever Gollum says my precious," he's calling Sauron by his own name, just in a different language, of course. But yeah, I think that Tom, like I said, Tom is only involved in the section that he's involved in, just like he's only powerful wherever he happens to be, and that because he's chosen to be in the Old Forest, that's where his power lies. So I don't think he caused that storm, because I don't think really that's his style either. I think that would be more of a Goldberry thing than anything. Now, something was brought up in the chat here that Melkor created volcanoes specifically. That was said to be one of the things that he created within the world, and this is true. And that as Caradhras and the rest of the Misty Mountains are not volcanoes, then we don't necessarily associate them with evil. And
they're tectonic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it goes into something that we talked about earlier, is that when you have a storm, you have a few different forces that you could attribute to different Vala. We have wind, which we that's Manwë, and we have water, which is Ulmo, and we have the bitter cold, which is Melkor. And there is just enough of Melkor left in the world that, yeah, his influence is still there. It is found mostly in gold, although it is in all matter. But most interestingly, the one element that Morgoth's essence is not really found in is water. So, that was as per Tolkien's notes in The Nature of Middle-earth, that while gold was sort of the Morgoth element, water was sort of where he wasn't.
Yeah, and Aule was the creator of mountains, the tectonic type mountains.
Yes.
So these are Aule,
yes.
And the dwarves obviously are his adopted, are Eru's adopted children. So the whole connection between dwarves and Aule and the tectonically formed mountains is all there.
Sid?
I agree with that last, and the whole raising of mountains and tearing them down in the battle between Melkor and Aule is an important part of how Earth was formed. But I want to come back to Bombadil for 1 second. This is like a totally wacky idea. Bombadil held the ring. It had no power over him. So now he is connected, or could be connected, to the fate of the ring. So what after the ring goes on its merry way, and Eru might just yell out, "Hey, Tom, I know you're limited to that one little area, but could you do me a favor?"
I mean,
that's what.
Hold on, Matt, 1 second. That's what's one, because I said to Sid earlier that I'm at a bit of an advantage here, because my view is compatible with pretty much any other view. And that's not by design; it's by happenstance. I want to bring up Bonnie Bell Plumbottom in the chat. By the way, very Hobbit-like name right there.
She
says
really attractive.
Matt apologizes for that comment. But
I mean it in a good way.
pointed out that, and Ben, yes, we do love wacky ideas. But Bonnie Bell Plumbottom, which I think is I think that could just be one of Sam's lost daughters right there. The spoken word biblically and in pagan beliefs, which Tolkien had a great interest in both, is how you can tap into the power of the divine. Going back to the, okay, so Bonnie Bell's smiling in the chat right now. Going back to the whole word of command thing. But like I said, I don't think that Iluvatar necessarily needs to act through Tom. I think if he wants to create a storm, he can create a storm. But we also don't know his mind, and we don't know the way that he works in his mind. Some of the Valar saw bits of his mind. Melkor saw a whole lot of it, and yeah, I don't know, still wound up the way he was, which was a great bit of arrogance. But yeah, that's basically what I say. I think that because it is a literary device, that they absolutely have to go through Moria, because if they don't go through Moria, Gollum's not going to hook up with them. Gollum has no reason to leave the Misty Mountains. He has no reason to leave Moria. He likes it there, other than the fact there's that wizard that captured me and threatened... No, there's that ranger, I should say, that captured me and complained the whole time and told me I smelled bad and put nasty ropes around my handses. And there's that wizard that threatened to burn me and made me remember things that I don't care to remember and feel things that I don't care to feel. And there's a guy who looks a little bit like that Baggins fellow, and I think he has my precious.
Let me go back to something that
I have to add one thing here.
Go ahead, Sid.
Yeah. I am certain that Gollum knew Frodo had the precious the moment they bumped into each other. The whole reason that Sauron let Smeagol go is he knew that Smeagol could feel the ring from hundreds of miles away, and it was the best animal-type tracker in the world, and he was counting on Smeagol to find the ring.
Yep.
And if Sauron knew that, he was right.
Yep.
So I
And
think
what he didn't count on was how much Gollum hated him.
Yeah. Or the idea that Gollum might actually repent due to Frodo's mercy. That's in the letters.
Go ahead.
I agree with Sid about that 100%. I want to go back to something you said that I really agree with, and that is that there is, if Tom is derivative, let's just say derivative of Arrow, okay? The communication situation between Arrow and Tom is going to be there. Now, if the ring comes in contact into his domain, that's the theory we're going to go with. I agree with what he's saying, with what Sid is saying. That is now within what you would call the radar screen purview of Tom. He knows of the ring. He knows he's got it. He knows where it's going. He arms them with weapons. He saves them from the Barrow-wight, which is way outside of his woods, by the way. It's 12 miles. And so he is capable of going out when he wants and doing what he wants according to what Arrow wants him to do, is my only point here. But again, John, this segment's about supporting you. And if he's derivative of Arrow, I'm basically saying, John, you have a very good point. It might be actually some combination thereof, which is what's the difference between the two?
Exactly. Now, in this, because this is the very, very Matt thing where he turns anything into Bombadil, which we come to expect and we come to love. I will say that the Barrow Downs are not outside of his boundaries. He did say where his boundaries were, and that it ended a little bit before Bree, and that's where he left them. He said Tom will not go any further than this.
Except everyone, including you guys a couple times, have said that he's limited to the Old Forest, and these are not the Old Forest.
No, I didn't say no.
No,
I never said that.
Okay. Who said that?
I've studied this in depth. As far as we can tell, the road that runs from the Shire to Bree, he will not cross that road. And then at a certain point towards Bree, he will go no farther.
And he points out that was the old political border of Cardolan and Arthedain as well.
But there's also one very peculiar thing. If you read the poems of Bombadil, he visits a pub in the Shire.
Yep. He goes to Buckland.
So at least part of the Shire, Buckland, and Farmer Maggot's farm, because he visits Farmer Maggot, are within his purview. Mm-hmm. So it's slightly, at least slightly into the Shire. We don't know how far. Maybe all the way into the Shire. It's along that road, and therefore it does include the entirety of the Barrow Downs. He didn't leave out with that one.
Some other people might have told you that he's limited to the Old Forest, but it wasn't me and Sid. I want to point out some things from the chat. Okay, so Laurel says that my idea of the spoken word of magic, and this alludes to something that Treebeard said, that he was shocked that Merry and Pippin freely gave their names. The idea is very old to protect your real name, and I want to point out that the dwarves never tell anyone their real names. They in their own language, and that's a big secret there. Sun Fury says that his thought of the ring not affecting Tom, we're off topic, but this is interesting, is that he doesn't have any ambitions for power or anything. It's got to be more than that, because not only does he put it on his finger and not become invisible, but the ring itself briefly becomes invisible. So I think it's really that the ring has no power over him because he is so different from any of the children of Iluvatar or the angels. He is his own thing, and something that Sauron never would have accounted for. Okay.
In particular, Tolkien adds to that, he has utterly no interest in power.
Yep.
So the ring can't touch him.
And Sun Fury points out that while the ring has no power over him, he also has no power over the ring. And that because at the Council of Elrond, it was discussed, why not bring the ring to him? And Gandalf said it's a really bad idea. He wouldn't understand why it's important. He would probably just throw it away or give it away to somebody as a trinket. It's just not a good idea. So
hold on. That's not... Okay, hold on a second.
We're so off topic, Matt. Could we move on?
That's fine.
This has nothing to do with Caradhras.
No, I know, but that's not totally true, because he was able to make the ring go invisible.
Yeah, he played with it.
He had total power over it.
That doesn't mean he had total power over it. It means that he could make the ring just vanish for a little while. But anyway,
you might say it was nothing. You might say it was nothing to him.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how I feel about it. Yeah,
let's see if we can wrap up.
We've gotten derailed by Bombadil here, but I want to go into the 5 questions that I have chosen. So the first one that I wanted to talk about was Aragorn's foresight specifically about Gandalf's demise. And I mentioned this earlier. Gandalf was the only one in the Fellowship that actually wanted to go through Moria. Gimli was willing to go, and a few others said that if Gandalf brings them there, they're willing to follow him, but they really don't want to go into Moria. Aragorn had been through there once before. He said he didn't want to go again. Legolas said he didn't want to go at all. The hobbits all agreed with Aragorn and Legolas. Gandalf was sort of really outvoted here, and the only reason that they went in there is because of the wargs suddenly appearing. So that's another reason that there's a little bit of divine intervention going in there, because nobody was agreeing with Gandalf, except for Gimli having some sort of little soft support there, and then they were sort of saying, hey, what about Frodo? What does he think? And he was thinking we should sleep on it, but they didn't even get the chance to do that. Aragorn gives a very, very dire and very specific warning that he says, I'm not worried about Frodo. I'm not worried about the ring. I'm worried about you, Gandalf. I have this feeling that something's going to happen to you if we go through Moria. And of course, he was absolutely right. And it turned out not necessarily to be something bad. Of course, it was the cause of great grief and sorrow at the time. But of course, it leads, all that despair leads to the eucatastrophe later on. But okay, so what's the mystery here? Aragorn has a little bit of foresight. We can't forget the amazing people that he's descended from. And I'm not talking about, Isildur, Elendil, Anarion. I'm talking about Melian, Luthien, elves and angels. Well, an angel, even Elu-Thingol, the one of the most majestic elves ever to walk in Middle-earth. Tur, the only mortal man ever to become an immortal elf. There are a lot of examples of really powerfully magic characters in his heritage. So, of course, he has a little bit of foresight, and we've seen it time and time again where Aragorn will just get a bad feeling about something, and he's always right, and he's right even more often than Gandalf is right in some instances. So I really don't see a great mystery there. I think that the Dunedain are a foresighted people, and that he is one of the greatest of all the Dunedain, especially in the Third Age. So I don't really think there's a mystery there. I think Aragorn just has foresight. He's not a seer. He doesn't sit there and scry, but he gets these inklings, and he's correct about these things. The next thing, and this is where I intersect a little bit with Matt, because I want to talk about the Watcher in the water. Whatever. I don't think that it's a nameless thing. And the reason that I don't think it's a nameless thing is because it literally has a name. It's called the Watcher in the Water. It's not really all that complex to me. To be nameless is to be nameless to me. My view of the nameless things is that they are the creatures, well, I should say the spirits, the demonic spirits that came out of the earth and took a form akin to spiders and mated with Ungoliant and created the race that includes Shelob and all the spiders of Mirkwood. But now, why did it target Frodo? Now, I liked Matt's view of it, but it isn't my view. My view is, like I said, I intersect a lot with Matt. I do think that it is, what did you call it? The malevolent neutral? Was that the phrase?
No, the neutral belligerent.
Well, it's similar to what I said, I guess, but belligerent's a better word for it because it suggests anger more than evil. And but I think that what we're looking at here is a deep sea creature that once lived underneath Moria, came out of it. The lake there was new. It wasn't there the last time that Gandalf had been through there. So I think that there at some point was some sort of rupture in the deeper infrastructure of Moria that leaked out some of that lake that was below it into the surface, and so we got that little lake there that made a very treacherous crossing. And here is this creature that came to live there, and I think it was hungry. And I think that's really all it is to it. I think Frodo was the one that was grabbed because him and Boromir were the closest, and he's bite-sized. I really think that that's what it comes down to. He's the one that could be fit in the creature's mouth, perhaps. Frodo and Boromir were the only ones actually standing by the water. So that's sort of like where I would go with it. It didn't really try to eat any of the larger characters, and the only other hobbit to come near it was Sam, and he came in swinging his sword, and that's when the creature let go of Frodo. So I don't think that it targeted Frodo. I do find it interesting what Laurel said earlier, that it was Gandalf that wondered why it went for Frodo, but Gandalf was in a state of confusion and exhaustion at this point. He had been basically, metaphorically banging his head against the doors of Durin for a long time, thinking about all these different words and spells and all the enchantments that he can come up with, and then finding out that it's really that simple. Just say the word friend. To comment on what you're saying, it's a title. If anything, so is Ungoliant, so is Shelob. Names are titles. Most names are titles. Aragorn is just like noble man. So all of our names are titles. But when Gandalf said there are nameless things deep in the earth, he is saying that there are things that we've never seen that gnaw at the roots of the earth. This sort of like octopus thing that comes out of a lake doesn't seem to match that description. So that's the second one. The third one that I wanted to talk about was Frodo actually seeing Gollum, which is really interesting. And this is something that Sid sort of hit on a little while ago, is that after Book 1 and the events that happen there, Frodo's vision is a little bit different. He sees things that other people don't see. Now, I'm not saying that nobody saw Gollum, but I don't think anybody saw him. I think Aragorn was aware that he was there. I think Aragorn heard him and recognized his footsteps and probably his smell, because this is a big thing that Aragorn had commented on, that Gollum had a distinct stench that he specifically disliked. So Aragorn being aware of Gollum doesn't mean that he visually saw him, just that he was aware of him. I think that Frodo saw him because Frodo can see things that others can't, because of nearly being drawn into the Wraith world. As it was pointed out by Sid, he could see the Eye of Sauron from far away. He could see the peak of Caradhras from far away. And also, he uses the Seat of Seeing with no sort of training in the arts of using that sort of thing. So I think that's all really important. Frodo's vision is different. So I think the mystery there is solved by the fact that, yeah, he had nearly slipped into the Wraith world, and that Gollum, who had worn the ring for hundreds of years and kept it on his person for at least 500 years, he has to be kind of teetering on undead himself in a way. Hobbits don't generally live that long. You know, when at the end of The Return of the King, Bilbo coming to the Grey Havens, he's not counting Gollum. Gollum's life is unnatural. So was Bilbo's, but we'll forgive him. He was senile at this point anyway, and I think he just wanted to boast that he was older than his grandfather Gerontius had ever been. Now I got to talk about Pippin's Rock. This is another one where I intersect with Matt. I don't think that Pippin's Rock had anything to do with the Balrog. I think that he dropped a rock into a well because he's a curious kid who does dumb things like that. I think Matt's very correct on the act of being naive and the power of naivete. However, they hear some sounds after this, some tinking sounds in the distant. Gimli says he believes it's a hammer being struck, and Gandalf agrees with that. It's not the drums in the deep just yet. They're not yet in that eastern section of Moria where the orcs are and the trolls are, and where the Balrog, more importantly, is. And Moria is quite literally crumbling infrastructure, so a stone falling down a well is not an unusual sound in the mines of Moria. The hammer sounds are absolutely a form of communication. It could have been orcs. It could have been saying, hey, did you hear that? Yeah, I did. But shortly after this, they come into one of the grand chambers of Moria, and Gimli starts singing. And he starts singing this loud song that echoes throughout the halls and the rafters and goes all the way up to the roof, which is very high. So yeah, if anything got their attention, it wasn't Pippin, it was Gimli. Also the fact that Gandalf is a Maya and he's glowing, and then the One Ring is there. So there's a lot of different elements that I think led to them being discovered, but I don't think Pippin is one of them. Which leads me into the fifth and final question. And absolutely, I agree with you, Sunfury, that the ring absolutely augmented what happened at Amon Hen. But even with, the ring, he has no sort of training in looking out in that sort of way. So I think that his unique vision definitely came into play. So the relationship between the orcs and trolls and the Balrog. Now, Matt's thought was that the Balrog is in total control of the orcs and trolls. I think that they... if he has an order, they'll do it. If he needs them, they're there for him. I think they're more afraid of him than anything. I think they're driven by fear. But we are also told that a lot of the mithril that is underneath Moria is being carted out of Moria by the orcs and being brought to Sauron. And it's quite interesting that in all this time that they're bringing mithril out for Sauron. We don't know what purpose it's for. I have to imagine he wanted to use it for weapons and armor for his greatest generals and such. But he does covet mithril, and the orcs were carting it out of Moria and bringing it to him. How is it that Sauron never hears that there's a Balrog underneath Moria? And this is where I really, like I said, you guys have been so quiet. I really want to hear your thoughts on that. Go ahead, Sid.
Can I?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's very simple. We don't absolutely know. I agree that Sauron didn't even... my best guess is Sauron didn't even know the Balrog is there. We're not sure of it. But just as Gandalf the Grey is invisible when he wants to be invisible... Mm-hmm. I believe that Balrogs like to sleep a lot. They're saying, I'm going to go to bed and wake up when Morgoth is back.
Yeah.
that's their preferred choice, unless they have a really good reason not to. And when a Balrog is under a mountain asleep, ain't nobody gonna find him. And when a Balrog is under a mountain and awake, only those who are near him and fear him are going to find him until he wants to do something else.
See, the orcs were definitely aware of the Balrog because they had a name for it. They called it Gosh. And it's just interesting, though. Like I said, it was probably there were periods of it being dormant. There were periods of it being not so dormant since the fall of Moria. I think that
but hold on, you didn't quite catch it. I'm saying when the Balrog wants to control, almost certainly by fear, the orcs and trolls, he's the boss of Moria. Yeah. Period. When he doesn't want to, he lets them do their thing, and almost everybody forgets about him. I mean, I even think that, Gimli ultimately knows the whole history of Durin's Bane, but he can't speak about it. And part of it is that it's secret.
Okay. Wait, 1 second, Sid,
but part of it is this hiddenness of the Balrog himself.
Right, Sid, 1 second. Okay, so I got to just address the chat here. So I pointed out that very early on that the whole purpose of it is that when we have Matt's section, we're all going to treat everything that Matt's saying as true. When my section, we're going to treat everything that I'm saying as true. And I'm really not feeling that same support here from the chat. And I want to say that we're getting a lot of argumentative stuff here. Like somebody just said, who says Sauron didn't know the Balrog was there? I'm saying that. I'm the one saying that.
Well, the chat is different than us.
I know, but
I'm agreeing.
Yeah, I'm saying that, and Sid is saying that. And if you want me to really answer it, and I really shouldn't have to because we shouldn't be getting arguments now. We should be getting support like you guys supported Matt. Because if Sauron knew that a Balrog was under Moria, he would have sent an emissary to speak with it. That's why he would have wanted to have formed some sort of alliance with it. Of course, it wouldn't be an equal thing, and they probably wouldn't have gotten along perfectly well, but they knew each other, and I think that Sauron would do his best to try to bring the Balrog out of Moria.
Okay, so let me support you, John.
Okay.
Ready?
Go ahead, yes.
I agree with you. And I agree with you only because if the elves know about it and the Red Book knows about it, and Saruman and Gandalf are afraid that this happened, and they heard about what happened to Balin and all this. Are you kidding me? For 1,039 years, Sauron doesn't know about it and maybe believe it's true? Because look, the year 3019 and then the battle where the discovery of the Balrog in Third Age TA 1980 is 1,039 years prior. There's no way he doesn't know or have heard rumors or descriptions that confirm, yes, this is true. If other people know it's true, Sauron has other ways to know that it's true. I personally don't believe he's actually made contact with it quite yet because he's still figuring out his own reconstitution issues and how he's going to deal with the Balrog when the time comes. I think also, by the way, that Smaug was a part of Sauron's end game and plan as well. But but he may have reached out to him and knew that he was there. But I think the whole idea that Sauron doesn't know the Balrog is in Moria is almost nil, in my opinion.
Okay, all right. This is what I'm talking about. I'm not getting the support at all. Like we're supposed to be treating what I'm saying as true, just like we treated what you said as true.
Just agreed with you on everything you said.
Except for the fact that, no, I'm saying Sauron did not know there was a Balrog under Moria. That's what I'm saying.
I thought you said he already knew.
No, I said John. Go ahead, Sid.
John,
okay.
One, I support you, and two, I have a way of saying both could be true. So I'll support Matt as well. One thing we do know.
Sorry, John. I misunderstood what you said.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. One thing we know is that Gandalf was afraid that Sauron was going to use Smaug.
Yes.
We have no sense that Sauron was going to use Smaug. We also, and so you could logically say it's sensible to be afraid that Sauron would use the Balrog, but there's no sign that he did, which means either he didn't know about him or he avoided him. And to me, but hold on, please let me finish. To me, both stories work. I prefer, I'm dead on with you, John. He just never knew the Balrog was there. Could be wrong, though. If he did know, why did he avoid him? I think that we also, from Gandalf, Sauron was a monomaniac,
yes,
desperately seeking the ring and terrified that any other powerful being would find it. The only beings he allows to aid him in finding the ring are the Nazgul, the ring wraiths, who are under his complete control.
They have no will.
Yeah, they are the only ones who would say, "Got the ring, but hey, Sauron, I got it.
Yeah.
Catch." So
I have a point of clarification for you guys.
Hold on. Let me back up because
I was trying to get to one last sentence.
Okay.
So both stories make sense to me. I agree with John. My view is Sauron didn't know the Balrog was there.
Okay.
But if I'm wrong, the reason he didn't go to the Balrog is the same reason he didn't go to Smaug, like Gandalf expected him to. He was monomaniacally saying, "I am doing nothing until I've got that ring," until it was too late.
Okay. So
I'm done.
The question that I had posed, which basically nobody addressed, so I'm going to address it, was that if we know that orcs were carting Mithril out of Moria and bringing it specifically to Sauron, how is it that they don't mention the Balrog that they know is there? So my view is because orcs are not all that intelligent. They are crafty, and they have an amazing sense of self-preservation. And if the Balrog tells them, "Don't tell anybody about me," they're more afraid of what he might do than what Sauron might do. That's the point that I was making.
Yeah, and I just linked that to the Balrog wants to hide, and the orcs are terrified of him. Two ways of saying the same thing.
So, my view of it is that they, because the question as was posed by Sid was, are they loyal to the Balrog, or are they driven by fear? But when we're dealing with creatures such as orcs, is there a difference?
I like that. I like the way you said that.
I think if you're dealing with Balrog and then shipping wagons of Mithril, and they're being received by any one of the Nazgul or anything that can penetrate the dim-wittedness of an orc, I just think that the secret got out. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I don't think it did because nobody knew there was a Balrog under there. Like Gandalf didn't know, and Aragorn didn't know, and they had both actually been through Moria before.
Yeah, I totally admit that it's a 50-50. I'm not saying you're wrong. Actually, I'm just saying I don't know. Flip a coin, but I'm saying yes, you could be right that he may not have known.
The only living being that we know saw the Balrog was Dane. And he didn't know it was a Balrog. He just knew there was some kind of horrible creature at the Dimril Gate that he called Durin's Bane. And that's where the name came from.
Yeah.
So, and once again, and this goes into something that somebody said in chat, is that, well, that's more of a title than a name. It's still a name. Names and titles are the same thing as far as Tolkien is concerned. They all have meanings, and they're all a form of a title. Even Samwise is halfwit. Not a very nice title, but that was what his father gave him. His father was very bad at giving out names. One day you should look at what Sam's three brothers are named. It's just as bad. Only his sister had a decent name because all the Hobbit women were named after flowers. But that's my take on those specific 5 questions, and it is interesting to see where I intersected with Matt in that we both went for the Watcher. And we both went for Pippin's Rock and the Orcs and Trolls. It's also possible, I just thought of this just now, that the orcs weren't leaving Moria, that the trolls were. That's very possible as well. And trolls aren't really very vocal. We get a couple of trolls, a trio of trolls in The Hobbit that speak full sentences and have ridiculous English-sounding names. One of them even has a family name, William Huggins, sort of a very ridiculous thing to think about. That's all Bilbo's nonsense. I absolutely believe that he ran into 3 trolls. I don't know that they spoke in full sentences and argued about how to cook him and all that stuff, and I certainly don't believe that one of them's name was William Huggins. It's a very Hobbit-sounding name anyway. But trolls notoriously not very vocal creatures, so it could be that the ones that were carting Mithril out of Moria were not in fact the orcs and were in fact the trolls. Orcs, as far as they have loyalty, they don't have loyalty to anything or anybody. They're usually conscripted into the Wars of the Dark Lords. We find out in The Return of the King especially that they don't really have any particular love for Sauron. They even think that he might be a little bit off his rocker and are already making plans to make a break for it as soon as the war is over and get away from him, which Sauron obviously wouldn't care for that all too much.
I agree that words have power, and you can speak words to power and all that. And a shout out to Bonnie Plumbottom out there, because it's one of the greatest names ever.
It's a fantastic name. I think it was actually. Hold on, let me scroll up. It was.
You guys know that in Scotland, in Scottish, Bonnie means good. So basically, her name means good red bottom. So I'm not going to go further than that. But it's kind of hilarious.
It's Bonnie Bell, and Bell means beautiful. So it's even
Bonnie Bell plum bottom. Okay.
Well, I think of it as a very floral name, like a very Hobbit lady sort of name.
Good lady red bottom. That's perfect. I love it. Yeah. She thought about that one. That's a good one.
Bonnie, if you're still in the chat, is that your actual name, or is that something you came up with? We need to know. Inquiring minds need to know.
Because it's one of the best I've ever heard.
I'm pretty much. Oh my God, that's a great autocorrect. Jonathan tried to type Mithril and it came out as Motorola. That's fantastic. Let me just. I'm done, but I wanted to address a few of the chat things coming in here. Bonnie Bell's still here. Is that your actual name, or is that a username? I want to know, because I think it's a great name. I think we're all very taken with it. Let's see. Somebody said something interesting here. Now, Jonathan points out that, oh, I'm sorry, it was David that points out. Oh, it's your gamer name. Okay. Well, it's a very. Did you mean for it to sound Hobbitish? That's my question, because the men in Hobbit culture all have ridiculous. It's all Bilbo, Bungo, Balbo, Bingo, all sorts of druck like that.
And Maggot.
Yeah.
And Maggot.
Yeah, and well, I think that's a family name. Well, maybe it's not, because he's only ever called Farmer Maggot. We don't know what his.
But his father was. I think it was a last name.
Yeah, there's Hamfast and all this stuff. But then the women all have these beautiful names like Eleanor and Lily and Diamond, and it's a lot better. You know what I mean? Goldilocks is another one. By the way, there's an elf named Goldilocks because
I can just see.
We're getting a little lost and wandering.
Well, I'm replying to the chat.
I don't want to run past.
I could just see Bilbo addressing the plum bottoms at his speech.
Oh, yeah, my dear plum bottoms. But anyway, there is an elf named Goldilocks, because in Elvish that word is Glorfindel. But David brings up the point is that maybe the orcs don't know how to communicate that it's or they don't know that it is a Balrog, that they know there's some sort of fire creature down there, or a fire. They call it Gash. Gash is the orcish word for Balrog, but it does literally mean fire. So it could just be sort of a situation like Dane, where maybe they did say there's something down there, but they didn't know how to communicate that it was a Balrog. That's not my thought, but it is an interesting thought. Oh, okay. So Bonnie has she did say she knew for sure that it was a Hobbitish sort of name. Absolutely, very Hobbitish.
Beautiful.
I'm done. So do we need a break before we go to your section, Sid, or are you good?
I'm ready to roll.
Okay, so now we're gonna shift gears over to Sid's
Good job,
section.
John, by the
And
way.
thank you. And I'm gonna remind everybody that like we did with Matt and like we almost did with me, we're gonna treat everything that Sid says as true, and we're all gonna support him.
Hey guys, this is going to be
Wow, you
lots of.
just lit up like the sun.
Yeah, I brought up
Your
my
notes.
script, which has a white background.
Yeah.
So this is I'm going to be sharing, but what I think has grown a great deal by listening to you guys. So I want to begin by saying there are two things I did which I don't think you guys did, and I don't think that other readers often do. One has to do with a very close reading of the book, and the other is a close reading in a particular way. When we're listening to, in particular, Elrond, Gandalf, Galadriel, and sometimes Aragorn as the wise ones, we can listen to it as both. Let's say Gandalf speaking to the people in the book, and also, if we're careful, Tolkien speaking to the readers on how to understand what's really going on. But we can only do that with a very big caution, which is if one of the wise ones says something ambiguous, be aware it is ambiguous. Reading it this way, I think we're going to find that there's a whole other level of a coherent tale that I see and have always seen. And we're talking back since I was a teenager. This has always made sense to me. And one of the reasons I don't argue it's right is because it is a nuanced quality of reading in a certain way, but it makes tremendous coherent sense with me. And it picks, I think we have agreed that there was some, it's likely, Matt initially didn't hold this position, but it's likely there is some intelligent will saying, you're not crossing Caradhras, you got to head down into Moria, whoever it might be. There's a question of the Watcher of the Gate. I do believe that the Watcher in the Gate was a nameless thing until the Balrog hauled him up, put him by that gate, broke the land so he'd have a pool, and he was a trap for Balin and company.
Or I guess anybody that may have come by.
Well, no, I think he specifically did it when the dwarves came in and he woke up because there were dwarves in his house and he got pissed and it was part of the trap.
Let me support that because it's interesting that according to the book that they read in Balin's tomb, they had already established themselves in Moria before the Watcher ate, I believe it was Ori. They said the Watcher ate Ori. So I guess they must have already been in there before the Watcher started stirring up. So that supports what you're saying.
Yeah. So basically they came in through the other side because they came from the Lonely Mountain. They came in from the east. And by the time they got to the west, they were trapped. That's how I see it. Mm-hmm. Anyway, here are some tips on how to read the book the way I read the book. Elrond at the end of the council. I'm trying to show you the mindset of Aragorn and Gandalf and somewhat Frodo and the rest of the nine from when they leave Rivendell. And Matt, thank you for saying, let's pull in some earlier stuff because I really used that this week. Elrond says at the end of the council, the road must be trod, but it will be very hard, and neither strength nor wisdom will carry us far upon it. This quest may be attempted by the weak with as much hope as the strong, yet such is off the course of deeds that move the wheel of the world. Small hands do them because they must, while the eyes of the great are elsewhere. Keep a watch out for that term, small hands. At the same time, Elrond says to Frodo, If you do not find a way, no one will. So the quest is now inevitable. Not that it will work, not that they have any idea how it will work, but they only know nothing else will except Frodo bearing the ring to Mount Doom. Elrond also says, the shadow has crept now even to the feet of the mountains and draws nigh even to the borders of the grey flood. And under the shadow all is dark to me. You will meet many foes, some open and some disguised, and you may find friends upon your way when you least look for it. I believe this is a message to the readers. You can look at everything that happens and ask, am I watching out for a foe? Which foe is it? Is this a foe to pick up on Aragorn, or Frodo about Aragorn, who looks foul but feels fair, or looks fair but feels foul, or Glorfindel, who's just pure fair?
Sid,
So
let me back you up here, because you've just given me what I think is a wonderful thought. The Fellowship of the Ring is, of course, divided into two halves, and the section that you're talking about is the very beginning of Book 2, which is really where it is the Fellowship of the Ring, because that's where it's formed. And I think that what you're seeing here, you're right, Gandalf is in a way speaking to the audience, that he is Tolkien's voice in a lot of ways. You're seeing the opening argument of this section, just as Shadow of the Past, he gave his open argument of what Frodo may come across, and even, hey, you might even have to go all the way to the Cracks of Doom. And now, where we know a little bit more about the situation, Gandalf is giving a revised sort of statement of, here's what you may expect in our, instead of a trial, adventure. And yeah, it absolutely is a message to the reader there.
Yeah. 2 notes. It was Elrond here, not Gandalf.
Oh, well, okay, so that's good, because now it's opposing counsel.
Yeah, but also the word I would use is quest. It has become a quest. Now, the next is Elrond saying a little further on, you should fear the many eyes of the servants of Sauron. I do not doubt that the discomfiture of the riders has already reached him, and he will be filled with wrath. Soon now his spies on foot and wing will be abroad in the northern lands. Even of the sky above you, you must beware as you go on your way. Now, this is an example of a frame that Elrond sets, but it's ambiguous, because he doesn't mention Saruman at all, but of course he thinks of Saruman, per Gandalf's news, as a servant of Sauron now. So when the Crebain are seen, we can look to, okay, it's a servant of Sauron, but is it Saruman? And it leads us as readers to ask these questions. Now, another very important one, and very ironic, this is Gandalf. If you bring a ranger, it is wise to listen to him. And now we get into the whole question of, if Moria is going to kill Gandalf, why Aragorn sees it first, and why does Gandalf go anyway? And that's absolutely central to the whole tale. If you want to know that in depth, you've got to really go read Tolkien's letters on how it was that Gandalf had to die and be resurrected. There was no successful quest without Gandalf the White. I'll edge into that a little more here, but it's key to everything I'm talking about. So Gandalf says, if you bring a ranger, it's wise to listen to him. Aragorn goes on to say, there are many evil and unfriendly things in the world that have little love for those who go on 2 legs, and yet are not in league with Sauron, but have purposes of their own. And that's what Aragorn says right after Gandalf says, listen to the guy. And this is the first hint that there might be an evil presence other than Saruman or Sauron. So I started to look for one. Gimli, Caradhras has not forgiven us and has more snow to fling at us if we go forward, but retreat is difficult. So Gimli sees from his view, this Caradhras, at least, whatever Caradhras is is an intelligent, malevolent being not allowing them to cross, and by implication possibly pushing them under Moria. Now, what is this malevolence? It's not Saruman. He doesn't have that kind of power. It could be Sauron, but there are strong hints now it's not. Then we have the intentionality of the details of Caradhras. The fact that there's that, they're trying to get out, and they get there, except all of a sudden there's a 20-foot high wall of snow. Only because Legolas can run over and say, hey guys, it's only 3 feet wide. That's the only reason they get out. So it forces the 9 walkers to unify as a team in a way they never have. Legolas can run ahead and see what's really going on. Boromir and Aragorn can push through physically. Boromir and Aragorn can carry the hobbits. Earlier, Gandalf could make a fire when no one could, and so forth. So they survive as a team in a way they never had before.
And we're getting to see their differing abilities put into play here as well, which is important for the reader, who is a lot of new characters thrown at them all at once to find out what they're all like. Because we know Frodo and Sam and Merry and Pippin, and we know to a certain extent Aragorn and Gandalf, but now we have, like I said, Boromir and Legolas and Gimli, and we're seeing what they're made out of and what they're all about as well.
Yeah, we're seeing them, and in the case especially of Frodo, we're seeing them as they grow and change. I can't, that's a whole thing for next month.
Yeah. You already know next month. Nice.
It came to me because of what I wrote today.
Oh, okay. That's wonderful.
And as soon as they break through that intentional wall of snow, the mountain throws a landslide on top, just behind them. Not on top of them, lets them get away, but it's saying, wow, the path you just tried to cross is now not only snowbound, it's an avalanche. Bye. So we have to...
And don't come back.
Don't go back, exactly. So we now have to seriously say some intelligence is driving them into and under Moria. I therefore propose that when anyone looks up at Redhorn Peak and senses malevolence, they are sensing the spirit of the Balrog. It is the peak of the Balrog's red fire, whether he's asleep or awake, but especially if he's awake. Now, why is he awake? There are several tiny passages where Gandalf says that the Balrog would sense and desire the ring. Also possible. We know that there are times when the ring is looking for someone to corrupt. He can't do it with Frodo. He gets, the only one of the 9 he can get an edge on is Boromir, and he does. He obviously didn't get Diagal, so he went for Smeagol 500 years earlier. And so I think the Balrog sensed the ring and wanted it and said, okay, you're not getting over Caradhras, you're coming in underneath into my territory. And he used his ill will to force the storm, creating the push to the Gate of Moria. I see the Watchers of the Gate, as I already discussed, was brought up by the Balrog earlier because he wants to maintain control of his domain, and now these noisy dwarves are butting in.
Sid,
but now that it's there, yeah.
I just want to see what your view is on something said in chat here. David brought up another allusion to the Hobbit here, is that in the scenario that you're speaking of, is that the Balrog, well, I think in any scenario this is true, the Balrog is a king under the mountain.
I never thought of the exact term.
Yeah, neither have I, but David just came up with it in the chat.
But,
fantastic.
And that not only matches in general King Under the Mountain, but specifically also Smaug, a fire
Yes,
being
absolutely.
who owns a mountain. Yeah.
And before you go on, just to address the chat here, just a few things. Good, saying goodbye to Sun Fury, who has been very active. He's leaving and says he hopes to catch another stream. We'll be well, not all of us, but I'll be streaming here just about every Thursday. And keep an eye on the community tab for schedules. And Moogle, you're talking about this game, The Lord of the Rings. Don't play it; it's so bad.
Okay. And Sunfire, was it? Is that his name?
Sun Fury.
Sun Fury. Remember, this whole thing will be recorded. Please come back and listen to the end.
The video on demand will be available tomorrow for members. You're not a member, but a few weeks it'll be available for you.
Okay. So the warg attack with these bizarre bodies that disappear, I think it's a form. I see it as a form of necromancy. Therefore, more likely Sauron than Saruman. Also, wargs come from higher in the mountain, and we've already been told that Sauron is gaining power up the sides of the mountain. So I don't know. It could be Sauron or Saruman. It's not the Balrog, but it does drive them in.
I agree with you. I agree with you, and I forgot actually to address the warg situation in my section. That was what I was going to say, so I'm in full support of you here. I believe it was Saruman, but I think that Saruman is just as capable of forms of necromancy as Sauron may have been in his days in Mirkwood.
My view is, to me, they have a different flavor.
Yeah,
and it's a pure personal flavor.
So I'm unclear here. Are you going after the idea that the dwarves think of the mountain as Kanye, the volcano god, like the Polynesians, or are you saying that the Balrog is the one who's got the power to control the weather because he knows at that moment they are trying to pass over the top of the mountain? Which way are you going with this?
I think it's the latter, but it informs the former. I think what Sid's saying is that it is the Balrog, but that the dwarves are attributing it to the mountain, kind of like what you said, is that without having that answer that they know, they're just going to say the mountain is of an ill will.
Yeah.
Okay. The Balrog knows they're there, and he's doing it at that moment.
Yes, and I'm saying I also believe that the dwarves as a whole, and Gimli representing them, know more and less than they think they know. That they know there was an evil creature who broke into Moria and brought down Moria, and I think they knew, that it was, to what, if any of them talked to elves, high elves enough to know about Balrogs, they may have even known it was a Balrog, but they can't think about him. He grays out in their mind, and they also do not think about anything of their own tales in their own language, in any language but Dwarvish, and they don't share that with anyone except perhaps Elrond when they really, really need him.
Question.
Let me just finish the sentence. So it's kind of an accidental, unconscious double secret, but on some level they know it's Durin's Bane, whatever Durin's Bane is.
So question. So you're saying that, like, in a way, that the Balrog is sort of a blank in their minds or in their collective consciousness, in a sense. Are we speaking to a sort of generational trauma where it's just something that's very difficult for them, or are we speaking about like a spell that had been put on them?
Both. I think it's generational trauma. I'm not wanting to think what happened to Khazad-dûm that made it Moria, but also I think just as Saruman can bewitch you with words he uses, both Gandalf and the Balrog can bewitch you with forgetfulness of themselves.
So I want to Matt. Let me
a real power.
Let me just go first, and then I'll kick it over to you. I want to support that because you're bringing into mind the tale of the children of Húrin, and the dwimmering nature of Glaurung, the first dragon, who was able to basically erase a person's memories with just his gaze and his words. And this was an agent of Morgoth, much as Durin's Bane was an agent of Morgoth. So if Glaurung could do it, why not the Balrog? Go ahead, Matt.
So I'm trying to find pathway here. If we assume that Gandalf and Elrond can control the elements of the River Brunnen when they were able to wipe away the Nazgul and form foaming horse heads in the river as it was done for S and giggles, then
Riders upon horses.
Yeah, riders upon horses. Okay, and Gandalf can do that, and he is not quite as powerful as Saruman, because Saruman at the time is still the head of the Order. But let's just say they're close. And we have the comparison of the lock being unlocked and held closed by Gandalf, and the fact that there is some kind of a magical parity between the Balrog and Gandalf over just a simple lock, which is a great indicator of some kind of some kind of parity there, because they're both using maximum effort over a lock, but whatever. Then that would mean I'm scaffolding, but this is how you do it in my mind anyway. If that's the case, then the Balrog, being at least equal to Gandalf in the magical sense, could possibly have enough power to manipulate elements
on his mountain. I think
on his mountain. But hold on.
No, let me add one sentence, and I'll give it back to you.
Okay.
We're talking about home turf advantage. Elrond and Rivendell can make a river, and Gandalf can add boulders and riders.
And Bombadil could do his thing in his place, yeah.
Exactly. And the Balrog can create storms. I mean, it's an expansion of the natural nature of a tall mountain, as you guys have said. That storm could happen there, so he can make it happen when he wants it to. Back to you, Matt.
Or Sauron with the volcano. That's the last one I want to mention.
Yeah, same idea.
So if you think of it that way, that would be a way that it could be done. That is all really circumstantial, but I mean, I've written articles that have been kind of like that in a way. I would just say that I still personally just have.
I'd rather if you hold. I'd like you to remember. I'm not trying to convince saying. Let me finish my whole tale and then reply at that point, because that's what we're doing in the final wrap up.
Let me finish my sentence. I was just going to say, I go with that. I go with what you're saying. I support that whole scaffolding concept. My only barrier, so you can maybe address it during the rest of your time, is I don't see any way to scaffold the rest of it, which is that he would know they were passing at that moment.
Okay.
And
that's easy. That's easy.
So you can address that.
Right. Let me address it right now.
Yeah.
And then, John, if you have more to say, that's fine. The Balrog sensed the ring.
Or Gandalf.
And wanted it. No, I think the ring. I think the Balrog sensed the ring and wanted the ring. And Gandalf even says this at one point. And perhaps, remember, the ring right now is trapped. He's held by Frodo, and he can't break Frodo's mind. So just as the ring wanted to get away from Smeagol when Gollum became useless, now he wants to get away from
Frodo.
And here comes a powerful evil being who he can easily seduce. So I think that the ring and the Balrog wanted each other.
Okay, I need to interject a question here and then give it back to you right away. Because this is going to help people. Okay.
Sure.
If the ring is known and seen or felt, does this mean then that the I just lost. Keep going.
Okay.
All right, let me just interject before.
But let me finish one thing based on what Matt's question. The Balrog does not look outside Moria.
Right.
So when the ring walks on top of Moria, the Balrog senses and wakes up. I think he was literally sleeping after Bowen and company were gone. But he knew folks were getting busy around him, so he kept one eye open. He sensed the ring, and that triggered all these events. John, back to you.
Two things. One is just from the chat, a wonderful comment from David, who says that we're seeing sort of expies of tutelary deities, that nobody leaves their domains, except for Gandalf. He's the wanderer, he's the pilgrim, he's the one that flits from place to place. Even Saruman is sticking to Isengard here. Matt, like I said, we're supposed to just treat what Sid is saying as true and come up with evidence, not ask for evidence. But
no, I'm not trying to test him. I'm actually trying to.
Well, I know. Let me finish. Let me finish.
To hit a T-ball.
Let me finish. But it seemed that what you were looking for was a bit of a connection here, and I think I can make that connection for the both of you. Is what we have here is and I think Sid is close here. Don't think of it as the Balrog sniffing the ring, but as the ring sniffing the Balrog. And most importantly, or it could be both, but I think the onus is more on the ring because, as you said, and this is what you were saying, it wants to get away from Frodo. It's been in the hands of hobbits for a really long time, and it has never worked out for the One Ring being in a hobbit's hand, even if it was a nasty one like Gollum. But the storm, this is where we got to get back to. I think that
I just remembered my question, so I just remembered it.
Okay,
go ahead.
But
go ahead.
How does he cause the storm? I think what we could do is we could look at what Sid's saying and say that maybe the Balrog isn't specifically thinking, I need to create a storm, but thinking, I need to stop them from going over the mountain and force them to come.
Then the mountain does what it naturally does with cute intelligent enhancements like the crash, like the avalanche and the snow wall. I'll go with that.
And some of it may not be, it may be almost subconscious. Like, we're going back to the Hobbit again. Smaug, in a rage, flies out of the mountain and starts smashing his tail against it, basically throwing a tantrum, traps the dwarves in the mountain.
Yeah, similar to that.
Okay, exactly. So if Saruman knows of the Balrog, Saruman knows or has a very strong hint that Balrog is there, and Saruman is in current contact with Sauron through the Palantir and has already been dominated by Sauron for many years by then, wouldn't then the suspicion or whatever knowledge that Saruman has about the Balrog being in Moria thereby be transmitted to Sauron, where Sauron would know this?
It's a bit off topic for tonight. I've already thought about this one.
I don't think
my turn.
I don't think that Sid said that, by the way, that Saruman knows about the Balrog.
I don't think that Saruman does know about it. I think nobody knows about the Balrog.
Yeah.
And number two, let's say that Saruman does. Remember, we're talking about two monomaniacs here trying to manipulate each other through a Palantir where you can't lie. They don't get into casual conversations about other things.
Yeah.
So they're just
I was just trying to find a way where what you're saying is true.
But Sid didn't say that.
Triangulate.
But I'm saying either Saruman didn't know, which is my belief, or if he did know, Sauron's monomania prevented him from asking intelligent questions, like, what are the good guys going to do with the ring? That's how blind. Okay, let me keep going.
Yep.
So, after Gandalf says, "Listen to Aragorn," Aragorn says, "If you pass the doors of Moria, beware." This is bringing a very deep and rather complicated tale, and it's at least 1/3 unwound in Tolkien's letters. We understand now Aragorn's reluctance. He doesn't want to lose Gandalf. What is going on with Gandalf's continuing inclination to go until they have no choice? This gets a little complicated. The essence of eucatastrophe and the essence of wisdom, especially in Gandalf, is we must allow everything to play out to the bitter end until darkness appears utterly certain to succeed. We cannot interfere with the free will of any being, not even a golem, not even a Sauron, until there is no choice. The only time Gandalf intervenes, he doesn't even stop Denethor from killing himself. He does stop Denethor from killing Faramir because Gandalf knows Faramir belongs in the Fourth Age. So all of Gandalf's actions, gray or white, are to allow free people to be free even when evil or stupid, and to carry things forward. And even when he knows something should happen, if he has a sense, remember, he wanted to go underneath Moria, in part just to be hidden from Sauron and Saruman, but there was something pushing him there, just like there was something pushing him to pick Bilbo as the 14th for Thorin, and he didn't know what it was. And he trusted that until what he foresaw became inevitable. Only this time, in addition to it being inevitable that they go under Moria, it was now inevitable that Gandalf die.
I've
got more to say, but yeah, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, Matt first, and then I'll go.
So free will and faith, where faith is in free will.
Exactly.
And I completely 100% agree with all of what you just said.
I want to back you up on a literary level here, Sid, because it's another analog to The Hobbit. The chapter specifically called Out of the Frying Pan and Into the Fire, and we're talking almost literally when we're talking about a fire under Moria, Gosh, the Balrog of Valorauco. They're going from one dangerous situation into a more dangerous situation, and in the case of the Hobbit, that secondary, even worse situation led to Gandalf, his willingness to sacrifice himself, and here we see it again where he actually does sacrifice himself almost as a fulfillment of something that could have happened in the Hobbit but did not.
That's cool, and let me add a humorous element. I don't think this was intentional on Tolkien's part, but if you're in a frying pan, what are the dangers? One, the hot stuff going on around you, and two, anyone can look down and see you. Crows can see you, Nazgul can see you. But in the fire, you're buried in the fire, you're in the oven, you're getting cooked from the outside in darkness.
Well, there's also, if you're in a frying pan, another danger is that weirdo poking you with a spatula.
Well,
yeah, well, I'm getting there. Let me finish my story.
And even funnier is if you're in the frying pan, you can be plucked out. But if you're in the fire, no predator is going to want to put their claws in there and grab you out of it.
Exactly. So, I've talked about the Watcher in the Gate, I believe, dropped there by the Balrog against the dwarves, but kept there because he's really pissed about people coming in without him knowing it. And then Gandalf actually says that he noted that the Watcher at the Gate aimed at Frodo, and he thought it was because of the ring. And of course, if the Watcher at the Gate had eaten Frodo and swallowed the ring, the Balrog could have come and gotten him out of it. So it was the first way the Balrog could have actually grabbed the ring. Now we're down to Pippin dropping the rock. Can I keep going, or do you need...
I just need to just say, for anyone in the chat who's wondering, that link that you see occasionally that my moderator is posting, that is, if you join that if you click that, that's to join my Discord server. If you ever want to talk about anything, Tolkien included, I'm on there. And my moderator, Alice, also points out that it's another parable here is the frog in the boiling pot, that you might find some relevance there as well. And David says that Gandalf is facing a test here. He has to resist the temptation of wanting to know what is under Moria.
Tolkien reads it differently.
I agree with Sid here. I think it's read different. I just thought it was a very interesting thought that came from the chat there.
Yeah. I don't think curiosity would be enough for anyone, not even Pippin, to go peek into Moria.
Yeah.
No, I'd really like to continue.
To address what you said about why does he ignore Aragorn when he said it would be wise to listen to him? And it's interesting here. I think he like I said, he knows. He, on some level, he might not be a conscious level, but on some level, he knows that he has to go under there, and something terrible has to happen to him. And Aragorn is absolutely right. Something bad's going to happen to him, but it is going to lead to that later catastrophe that has to happen.
Yeah, I'd like to lay that out with a little slower and with more care. Yep. I don't think Gandalf quite knows it until somewhere between Caradhras and after they're thrown in by the Watcher of the Gate and there's absolutely no escape. But I think at this point, and actually this was portrayed very well by Peter Jackson. Peter Jackson talks about it in his backstory. Gandalf is increasingly aware that Aragorn is right, and it is his own doom, but it is this situation that we said Gandalf always goes to. He follows his intuition wherever it leads, and his intuition is always right because it's direct from Eru. He doesn't know the reasons for it, and now this leads to the ultimate, how does this work out? With one note. It happens over and over that Elrond and Gandalf and Galadriel have strategic foresight, but Aragorn has tactical foresight. Galadriel's up there saying, what must be? Legolas must become the first of the elves, of the Sylvan elves, to go to the west, and his whole race will follow him. Ditto Gimli. Because this is the beginning.
He's not Sylvan.
Sorry, whatever. Drop it. But she has an incredibly far foretelling sense of the future. Elrond does too. Gandalf has it all the way through to the successful conclusion of the War of the Ring. But Aragorn can say, "Whoa! If we're going to win this battle, we've got to launch a surprise attack out of Helm's Deep. Wow, if we go into Moria, Gandalf is in deep, deep trouble." And the contrast between the two is where the destiny is worked out to the very last moment. It's the essence of eucatastrophe.
Yep.
And so now, as Gandalf keeps going, he knows it must happen. And he doesn't know what must happen, but he knows his doom is on the line.
Following all the nudges.
Yeah. Next piece, Pippin and the Rock. I have a different view here. And again, this works for me very deeply straight out of the text.
So, quick question. So you're saying it's not what I said and it's not what Matt said. It's a third thing.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm very interested to hear this then.
Yeah, Gandalf is slowly getting aware. Oh, Pippin, you mean? Yeah. I believe that Pippin perpetually does foolish things that lead to unexpected awful things that lead to unexpected good ends. So he foolishly offers to serve Denethor, which puts him into all sorts of hot water, but saves Faramir. That's the big example. But this one, he foolishly spaces out, and as a dumb kid, hey, what happens if I drop a rock down a bottomless pit? Gee, it makes a lot of noise. And everything you guys have said about that mental act fits Pippin and works, but one thing. John, this is where I do disagree with you. I do not think that Eru set up the storm on top of the mountain. I don't believe he does things that big. I do believe he perpetually has his hand in, but only in the tiniest, nearly invisible way. He has his hand in. Well, let me finish, please. It's poetic. Let me finish.
I'm not trying to interrupt you.
Oh, I thought I heard you speak. I apologize. So,
You heard me suppress a yawn. Not because you're boring, but because I'm an insomniac.
Gotcha. Here's how it goes. Eru interferes with the people of Middle-earth through their small hands picking up and dropping objects in dark places.
Like the Palantir.
I'm then going to the yes, that's another example.
I wanted to back you up on that because that's another thing
Yeah.
that Pippin did.
But let's just back it up with rings and rocks. Diagal sees a bright shiny object at the bottom of a pond. The ring gets Diagal to grab it because it doesn't want to be hidden in the muck anymore, because it senses Saren is nearby looking, and he thinks, wow, I can become public and Saren will find me. But Smeagol totally is devoured by the ring. Yeah, the ring says, yeah, Diagal's nothing. Smeagol I can use. But Gollum is there. Smeagol becomes Gollum, but Eru is there, and so he causes Gollum to come to hate the sun and hide under the Misty Mountains for 400 years, totally screwing the ring's effort to get away. Until one day, the ring says, screw all this, I'm dropping Gollum, and Eru says, no problem, I'm having Bilbo get dropped on his head and fumble around with his hand and pick up the ring. And then he doesn't need to interfere for a while, but now here he needs to interfere in two ways. He needs to find Gollum again and induce despair in Gollum, so Gollum will go under the mountain and head toward the ring. And he needs to cause Pippin to drop the rock. I believe the hammer tapping is how to send messages from the probably orcs who just keep an eye on the relatively dead, empty west end of Moria, generally blocked by the Watcher at the gate and the pool there, but just in case. And when they hear that rock fall, they send tapping messages that lead to drums beating, because when the Balrog wakes up, he calls his drummers to get things going. And so the exact timing was handled by Eru's control of, quoting Elrond, the small hands that move things forward when the wise are looking elsewhere. This then rolls forward to the climactic moment when at Balin's tomb, where the whole history is revealed when they read the book of the Chamber of Mazarbul, they now know what they're facing. And this is now straight out of Tolkien's letters. The temptation that Gandalf faced and overcame. He had to let go of his belief that he himself had to make the quest succeed. He was caught in a conundrum. If he didn't stop the Balrog, the quest would fail. He can only stop the Balrog by dying, and he thinks, okay, well, the quest is going to fail, but I have to save my friends, and only I can kill the Balrog. So he does what the moment calls for, saying, God, I blew it. I failed. I trust in you to make it work. And that is exactly what Tolkien in the letters says.
I want to back you up here, Sid.
Oh, let me finish. I got you. 1 minute. But that is exactly what Tolkien says. It was because of that surrender, the surrender of him being part of the quest, that made him worthy to be resurrected. And that is the term that Tolkien uses there, and I think pretty much nowhere else, as Gandalf the White, and given the full power to succeed, and given the full wisdom of Eru's foresight. Go ahead.
He does use the word with Baron, but that's like a very different circumstance. I want to back you up on the thought that, because you hit on one of the Catholic themes that we see in The Lord of the Rings, which was not something that initially was intended, but became something that he had to... this is why I asked if you needed a break before your section, Sid.
Go ahead.
He has to let go of what you said, your exact words, the belief that only he can lead the quest. So essentially his pride. He has to let
Yes.
go of pride in this instance, and it's an extremely Catholic belief that pride is not a good thing in any circumstance, and that he has to let go of it and just see what happens. He has to operate the way that he normally operates off of faith, and he has to sort of let go of this idea that only he can lead them.
Look at certain words you said: pride, let go, and the classic Catholic statement is, "Pride cometh before a fall." So what is the
And he falls.
doom? Yeah, he falls. He falls a bleep of a long way.
I have something to add here. He doesn't fall.
No,
He
only
chases.
only in the literal sense, because
No,
he's
I
grabbed
know.
by a whip and he falls, and then yes, he
understand.
chases. But I'm talking only in the
chases.
literal sense of falling.
Sure.
Yeah.
Gotcha. He at that point, I agree with everything you've said so far about what the Catholics believe. I'm Catholic, so
Yeah, you're the
I
only
agree with all
certified
that.
Catholic here, so we need to hear your thoughts here.
No, I don't mean that. I just mean you're
Well,
right.
no, I know, but I mean you have the better insight here for Catholicism.
Well, thank you. But yes, you're correct. You're both perfectly astute on this, and but giving it up and then falling, and actually deciding to chase the Balrog down into the underground lake and go after the Balrog did save them. It was a success because he knew that if he did not chase the Balrog, that the Balrog probably would not die of this fall, and the Balrog would
Wait.
find its way out because he knew every place, everywhere to go. About the Maiar don't kill themselves that way. I mean, Gandalf fell the whole way; he didn't die. So
Yeah.
the point is that by going after him, not falling but chasing.
Well, I
It
do have
actually
to
was success.
say he did he was not chasing he chased the Balrog up. Going down was because
Yes,
the Balrog
okay.
snagged him with his whip and
I'm
dragged
not saying
him
you're
down.
wrong. I'm not saying you're wrong anyway.
But I like what you're saying.
Hold on. You're both
I'm just
right.
saying that he
Hold
was.
on, Matt, just
Yeah.
give me one second. You're both right because he was snagged by the whip. He lost his grip and fell, but then he turned around and hewed at the bow. He switched. He changed from falling to chasing because he hewed the Balrog as they both fell. So you're both right.
Yes,
Thank
it
you.
seems like there was a mission change when he first let go of the rock to go. He was going to fall, but then he decided to chase. I understand what John's saying. He's totally right. But he saved them and was a success in the end because the Balrog was going to chase the Fellowship and he was going to get the ring. They could not.
Yeah.
They could not counter him. They could not outrun the Balrog. There is no chance. We all agree with that. They were toast, and the Balrog was going to end up with the ring, and Sauron would then end up with the ring.
I want to bounce off of what you
Or
said.
the Balrog would destroy Sauron. We don't know. Go ahead, John.
Or at least challenge him and lead to a terrible war that would ravage Middle-earth for decades and centuries. There's something from the chat I want to address, but also I wanted to bounce off of what Matt said. And also what Sid believes is that this whole section, a lot of people think of it as this is Gandalf's death, and I say this is Gandalf completely victorious. He succeeds in a way that nobody else had. And by the way, for people who don't realize this, the Balrog did not kill Gandalf. Gandalf killed the Balrog, and then he died. And he probably died because he was an old man who was already tired when the Balrog showed up, and he spent 11 days chasing and fighting something instead of doing things like sleeping, eating, and drinking water. He was he probably collapsed from exhaustion and
can die of exhaustion,
dehydration, and hunger.
Yep.
Actually, yes, but there's also another reason. There are various stories of the the crucifixion, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. But one particular one that Tolkien must have known, because there's a very limited quantity of Old English written material, and every scholar of Old English, which Tolkien certainly was, read everything ever written in Middle English. And there's a little 20 to 40 page poem called The Dream of the Rood, which is a Celtic warrior version of the harrowing of hell, where Christ, after he dies on the cross, falls down all the way into hell and fights to free worthy souls and bring them back up to heaven. And that fighting battle story of fall and resurrection is the motif of what Gandalf is doing. He must destroy the present enemy, a great demon, for all the reasons Matt has said. And in doing it, he knows he will die. Why? Because if we take Tolkien's later versions of Balrogs, in which there are only 7 or 8.
Between 3 and 7 was his exact words.
Yeah. Oh, I remember it as 7 or 8. Yeah. But anyway, by the way, if there are 8, there's 1 left.
Yeah,
it was a hilarious joke. This is why children are scared of monsters under the bed.
Before you go too far, because I did need to address something from chat. Something that David said, and I think you'll find interesting. Gandalf the Grey had to let go of Frodo. Gandalf the White had to bring about the return of the king. And it goes to what you said about giving up the quest, because nothing that... only one thing. Gandalf does help Frodo when he's at the Seat of Seeing, but everything he does after that as Gandalf the White is in helping Aragorn, not in helping Frodo. And in a way, he is helping Frodo, but he very much does concern himself with the return of the king.
But if you look, and this starts in when Gandalf reappears in
Fangorn.
In Fangorn and meets the 3 faithful ones, he literally at one point looks east and says, "No, Frodo's doing fine, and he's beyond my reach."
Yeah, and
to just Frodo,
give you a little bit of a linguistic backup on the harrowing of hell thing of what Gandalf called the Balrog in his speech. He said, "Flame of Udun." Udun is the Elvish word for hell.
Mm-hmm. Yep. He also goes down. Jesus also goes to hell to demonstrate his power over Satan, also in his power over death itself, and so there was those added things to it,
and to rescue the faithful who should have ended up in heaven.
That too. Yes.
That's what harrowing means. It means go in at the end of the harvest and pick up the wheat that got missed.
Yep. All those things.
So So, and by the way, I am not saying that Gandalf is.
He's not Christ. An allegory. Yes, I didn't think you were.
But there is a parallel, not an allegory. That's a whole. I'll do that in 2 months.
An illusion.
An illusion and a parallel, which is even stronger than an illusion. But anyway, but the key here is Gandalf, over the course of traveling through Moria, and this was Peter Jackson's version, and I agree with it, begins to see this is about his own doom. And the things he says to Frodo in both the book and the movie, he's starting to mentor Frodo to be able to live without him. And he's starting to show Frodo, yeah, you're right. You do see Gollum. Yeah, you're right. This is what you're going to have to do. So he's setting up as best he can, knowing he himself is toast as Gandalf the Grey, and not knowing about his own resurrection. And it's because he doesn't know and does the faithful right thing to the bitter end that he is worthy of being resurrected, empowered with the entire mission of all 5 Astari, and sent back for a short time, both with much greater power and with greater permission to use that power as an effectively omniscient. He no longer says, this is what I think Sauron is doing. He reads the mind of Sauron. And Matt, the one thing I would add, the one thing he does directly is he perfectly aligns the timing of the last battle as a distraction to Sauron of where is the ring, as the ring is moving up Mount Doom.
Okay, Sid, I have a question for you based on what you said, and I want your thoughts on this because I think it's going to be
Sure.
interesting. You said that, like, through this idea that we're all, as of now, treating as absolutely true, that Gandalf, in the process of, starting with Caradhras and going through Moria, knowing that he is going to die, what do you think is his thought of what happens at that point? Does he think that he's going to wind up in the West? Does he think he's going to appear in Mandos? Does he think that it's going to be the end of him in the world totally?
I'm going to speak from personal mystical experience here, so I have no way to validate it. I believe the only way to enter that state is to not know. It is a complete surrender of the idea of one's own future existence.
So you think he's not contemplating it at all? He's let go of any thoughts in that
Well,
matter?
he has finished contemplating it
Okay.
to the
Yes.
point of is the answer is actually the traditional Christian term is I will enter the will of God. Period. Matt.
100% yes. And this isn't to take any away from anything you think you said. This is to put frosting on the cake you just said, because it's all true. But I think he also enters into a state of being the decided and committed valiant warrior to serve.
Absolutely.
And that's all there is. I mean, what you said is true, but there's also this other part of it, which is just I will serve and I will be valiant in my service. Period.
Which is
and now here I go.
Which is the end of his arc too, as a character who started as this very shy character named Lauren, who was afraid of Sauron, did not want to go to Middle Earth, was afraid, and thought he was weak.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he was weak, which is what made him the perfect vessel for strength.
I have to just address what Laurel said, because Laurel's addressing what Sid said. Laurel says, I wrote about that, Sid. People always want to say that Eru doesn't do anything because of the possibility of destruction, like Numenor's destruction, but in fact he works in small, quiet ways. It's that still, small voice of First Kings and the prophet Elijah.
Agreed.
Well, Eru only acted in Numenor because the Valar gave up governance. In this particular
they
case,
laid down their stewardship of the
exactly.
world.
That's a big sign because at that point there's only Eru left to make any decisions. But I still agree with what Sid is saying, that this is in the end free will and faith and small hands moving rocks.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll say with that is that if we go to Numenor, the reason that or my belief about the reason that the Valar gave up their stewardship is not only that there was nothing they could do with something so unimaginably heinous as what they faced, but also because they saw that although they were meant to be the stewards of the firstborn immortal elves, they were not meant to be the stewards of the secondborn mortal humans. Mortal humans belong directly to God. We are slightly less than angels, and our destiny is with God. And therefore, the whole reason for the beginning of the Fourth Age, in which all sentient beings except for humanity or mortal beings, in case there are a few hobbits hidden away still, is that the human destiny with the creator of humanity, who eventually becomes fully human and fully divine in Christ, is supposed to be directly in Eru's hands, proving false the fundamental lie that Melkor Morgoth buried into our minds, that when our body dies, we're toast.
And to back that up, Numenor was a mistake. The Valar should never have dealt with expanding the lives of men. We're not supposed to live as long as those men did. We're not supposed to be that close to the elves. We're not supposed to be that close to Valinor. We're supposed to be our own thing. We're supposed to be closer to Iluvatar. And what was his version of Ragnarok or Revelations? A mortal man killing Morgoth and then becoming one of the Valar himself.
Mm-hmm. Which is very parallel to us discovering that we are little less than angels. And that's the human journey exemplified by Christ being fully human and fully divine.
Anything else?
And a good lesson that.
Okay, I've got a couple little points.
Yeah.
I believe so. It's all the John. The reason I hold a different. This is where we're getting into how our views do differ, and that's okay because we're in the final wrap up.
Well, if you want to do your outro, could we take a brief break before that because I it's been a while.
Okay, if you need a break, you got a break.
Okay, let's go over to here because not that. Come on, now that one. Because we've gone far later than we normally go, which was the plan for today anyway. But I'll be right back, guys. I have to pee, and then we'll have our final discussions and Sid's outro.
Enjoy yourself.
You always do.
I'll be right back, Matt. Oh, you're okay. I'll sing a tune and say a poem in black speech, something like that. If everyone really like that. I can't see the chat, so sorry I can't. Oh, I can see the chat. Hold on a second. Has anybody gotten anything in there they want to hear about while they're gone? By the way, hi Laurel. The answer to your question about whether anybody made armor out of dragon scales, the answer is yes.
Wait, what were you saying, Matt?
There's a question in there about whether dragon scales were used as armor. There's a reference to that in either Unfinished Tales, Appendices, or Lost Tales. I can't remember. It doesn't conflict with any. That
is Book of Lost Tales. Generally speaking, it's the way that I answered Moogle is that people didn't generally touch dead dragon. They thought it was a profane thing.
Sure, but there were people who were willing to scavenge and trade in it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, that's one of the more like very early ideas that he had. I see Sid's not back, so I just want to say that apologies for having to get up so often. Normally, I make it all the way through these Tolkien streams without having to get up, but I'm coming out of a migraine, and when you come out of a migraine, it involves a lot of going to the bathroom.
I only have to go to the bathroom on Tuesdays, and it's not Tuesday.
I really hope that's a joke. I feel so sorry for you if that's the truth. Welcome back, Sid.
Yes, I am back.
All right, let's come over to here. All right, we're back. Okay, so I mean, I think we got a good handle on Sid's view, and like I said, during that, we all, we're supporting Sid. Final sort of thoughts. Now, I said earlier, and I stand by this, that I'm at a little bit of an advantage in the way that my view is compatible with both of your views.
I agree. Actually, the thing I was going to say right before you broke is about that, though. I have one personal disagreement with one part of your view, and it's a problem that Tolkien talked about. If we say that Eru created the storm on the mountain, just like and Tolkien admitted this was a literary mistake, that having the eagles rescue Gandalf in The Hobbit opened the door to a literary danger called Deus Ex Machina, meaning God arrives in a machine. Because it's great in a story, God comes down and fixes everything, except it spoils every story. Because God fixed me. God fixed the world. And then we get pissed at God for not fixing the world. And it's a spiritual trap and a literary trap.
Yes, and it also means that if God can always fix it, there's two things that happen. There's no free will, and the moral dissension of the beings that are created get worse and worse and worse, expecting to be corrected and fixed all the time.
Right.
I do want to point out that Iluvatar creating the storm doesn't eliminate anybody's free will, because they all have the choice, if they choose to give up and go home.
I agree, but I'm just saying, on a general rule, Tolkien was very careful after what he did in The Hobbit.
Yes, I love that
you. Oh, let me finish, please.
Okay.
To make sure that you could read the whole book with Eru never doing anything other than having hobbits fall under mountains, bump their heads, and bump into rings. Yeah. He kept it utterly minimal.
Okay.
Yeah.
You got to let me cut in when I need to cut in, because this is important. I love that you mentioned the phrase, though, Deus ex machina, which the translation is a little bit different from what you said. It's actually God from the machine. In a recent article that I wrote about the literary function of the Balrog, and I alluded to it earlier as the negative side of the equation to temporarily cancel out Gandalf, because all the heroes have to learn to grow without him, and they can't always rely on him, which is, he's sort of God in absentia in that sense. He's their sort of view of God that they're always going to rely on, and they can't always rely on Gandalf to bail them out. He can't always be there, especially as he's going to sail to the west. He's not going to take part in the scouring of the Shire. There's a lot of things that Gandalf's not going to do. And I referred to, I think you're going to like this, I referred to the Balrog as the Diabolus ex machina.
Mm-hmm. Yes, works. And I'll go one step. There's when we get into this thing of in the hundreds of forms it comes up with, especially in this materialist era where we define omnipotence as, I can do anything I want at any time, we end up blaming God for a tremendous amount of things. And in my view, when we do that, we fall into the error of God creating a problem for ourselves, because we are adult children of God. He will not treat us like little children. When we were little children, he would go fix everything. But now we grow up, we get past age 13, we are physiologically adult enough to reproduce the species, and it is time for us to be responsible adult human beings. And every time we go around blaming anyone, blaming our girlfriend or boyfriend for not liking us anymore, our parents for doing a bad job raising us, or God for not fixing the world, we become one of 8 billion irritating blankety blanks who blame everyone and don't step in and fix the problem. And so the ultimate lesson is, how will you use the time into which you are born? And Gandalf teaches Frodo and Merry and Pippin. Remember at the end, he says, the whole reason you went off to war for a year was to come back, and you're going to become Thane, and you're going to become
Master of Buckland.
Master of Buckland, and you're going to become whatever the term for the Chief Took is, and
that's the
Sam
Thane.
will become the Thane,
Thane.
And Sam will become mayor for 49 years. That's the real reason it was all about, is grow up and do your job.
Yeah.
And this is another way of looking at Bombadil. Bombadil may be the only being in Middle-earth who grew up and did his job from the very beginning.
That leads me to my last comment for tonight, and that is that if Tom is truly derivative of Eru, and he is the master of wood, water, and hill, then I see him as Deus ex terra.
I love that. God from the earth. God from the earth. Yeah.
And that it goes back to the panentheistic sense that God has created everything, and God is in all the earth and all the beings created, in literally everything created, and that Tom as derivative is Deus ex terra.
And if
Yeah.
anybody wants to
And
read the panentheistic view of Bombadil, I highly recommend you seek out Matt's article on Bombadil that you could find on Quora.
yeah, and Matt and I have discussed in the background, but we haven't done the live stream yet. I believe that Bombadil and Goldberry are protectors of the Shire, and the
Oh.
Shire thrived in the way it did for centuries.
Oh, you know that I agree with that.
I agree with
Okay.
that. I agree with that totally as well.
Well, it's interesting,
And
though, because Bombadil, Goldberry, also the Dunedain, and Gandalf. And but in the end, though, they're going to be left on their own to their own devices, and they have to grow up and do their job, and that's what we see in the Scouring of the Shire.
yes, and well, the Sky of the Shire is just the very beginning of it. It's the entire Fourth Age, in which the only protection they receive is a protection from foreign powers who would destroy them. So they end up being like Iceland or the Faroe Islands under Denmark.
Yeah. Yep.
Well,
They become quite self-sufficient at that point.
Sid, okay, so we've gone very late, which is fine, but Sid, you have an outro you wanted to do.
We've. I'm just going to pull together everything we just said. Look at what we did tonight, and this is an invitation to everyone on the chat and who listens to this in the future. What meaning do you find as you read Tolkien? It makes sense this way, and the only rule is it doesn't literally directly contradict things Tolkien says. You know, if you declare Eru is evil, you've missed the point. And finish the story in your own heart and soul for your own purposes. If it's about aesthetic satisfaction, great. If it's about escape into fantasy, Tolkien was a big fan of escape. If it's like me and taking on a crazy goal of becoming as mature spiritually as I can become through reading Tolkien as a gateway into sub-creation under God, you can do that. But whatever you do, be true to your heart. Do what is true to you, and know that if you do that, you're right. And one thing I would have said, John, is rather than saying from the beginning, during your period, your story is true, I would just say, during anyone's period of reading, sub-creating, writing, fan fiction, being a lore master, anything, we bring forth a truth. And the beauty of it is 3 authors can each make each other's truth stronger with the support and feedback, and 3 authors can each bring stories that disagree in large part or in detail, doesn't matter, and we can strengthen each other and create harmony, like the music of the Ainur, by working in this way where the truthfulness of what we do matters and the who's right doesn't matter at all.
That's well said. And to just piggyback on what you said about the way that we read and the way that we finish the story in our own minds, because the story is not finished when the author writes it. It's finished when we read it and understand it in our own way, and in Tolkien's own words, apply it to any matter of our lives. It's kind of hard to do it wrong. There are people that manage to do it. There was a book called The Last Ring Bearer. That was an example of doing it wrong. Palantir, the corporation, they're doing it wrong. The CEO's understanding of Gandalf as a warmongering maniac and Sauron as the good guy, yeah, that's doing it wrong. But if you have these different views of the mysteries that Tolkien gives us, that's completely different. We've had 3 very different ideas there. Go ahead, Sid.
I just want to give a really funny example. I had a friend who watched the entire movies. I think he knew of the books, and the only thing he got from the whole thing is, Meat's back on the menu, boys. And I said, okay, my friend, enjoy being an orc, be the best orc you can. And I left him out of my life.
I'm going to send you I'm going to send you that poster.
That's one of my favorite stories to tell about Sid, because it's like, can you imagine even having to deal with something like that? The things that we deal with are pretty crazy, but I have to say that I've at least never have dealt with anyone so ignorant as to say that. And he was being more kind than he needed to be, because this person said that it was the most inspiring part of the films. Imagine being inspired by a kind of a clear, stupid joke.
This was a person who had been a dear friend for 5 years and supposedly growing with me spiritually.
Yeah, I mean it's It's like if they watch the Hobbit.
Sending him, by the way, and wherever he is, I'm sending him love right now.
He needs it.
Whether he's orcish, maybe he's not. Maybe he got over being orcish. I have no idea.
He needs it. Or it's like if they watch The Hobbit, which I mean I didn't really care for those movies that much, but you say, oh yeah, my favorite part was when they were all fighting in the barrels. I would just, oh gosh, like that kills me.
It's painful.
I mean, and people do ask me what was your favorite part of the Hobbit movies, and I'll always answer the same way. It was when all the dwarves sang in Bilbo's house, because that was the most Tolkien thing that I'd ever seen on screen at that point.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the next 9 hours was weird, but
yeah, it had its moments for sure.
It did have some good moments, but for the most part, you could tell that it was they were punching a clock. Mm-hmm. In a way, they were, and you could make you could make all sorts of things out of the Lord of the Rings, and we do support fan fiction and stuff like that. Like I said, it's hard to do it wrong, but if you want to see examples of how to do it wrong, like I said, The Last Ring Bearer, that's a perfect example of how to do it wrong.
The part of The Hobbit I really liked was the warg scene on the trees.
That was good too. Yeah, they did a good job at that one.
I mean, it was a little adaptive, but it was mostly pretty decent. I thought that was kind of cool.
I mean, I have no problem with it being adapted. As a matter of fact, Sid earlier was talking about, and Deborah in the chat was wondering about this, about Gandalf telling Frodo all these things that he needed to know in Moria. That was in the movies. That wasn't in the book, but that is another version of the Lord of the Rings. It's not completely invalid just because it's not Tolkien.
Yeah, mm-hmm. And I think it actually served the spirit of Gandalf's. Gandalf did change emotionally in those 3 days, and I think the movie interpretation of that was written outside the original text, but I think it caught it really well.
There are the moments that deviate from the book, but they still work.
Exactly, and I think that was one of them.
Boromir's death scene, perfect example. That worked.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that was one of the greatest scenes.
And I believe that was Sean Bean's idea too, to have him acknowledge Aragorn as king before he died.
Yeah, that was one of the best scenes.
Since we were talking about favorites from The Hobbit, I have to say that once I read in what was the book that was published first after Tolkien's death?
Unfinished Tales, right?
Unfinished Tales. Yeah. In Unfinished Tales, they're talking in sorry, I'm very tired. In Minas Tirith after the War of the Ring is over, and Gandalf says, well, here's what really happened when I went and scratched on Bilbo's door and got him to join. And he just tells the exact same story with no factual differences from a totally different perspective.
Tonal differences, though. Well, we were talking about the films, but I love that part, too. I come back to that a lot in my articles. Jonathan in the chat says, Sid growing out that hair, are you trying to give Galadriel a run for her money?
I was kind of thinking of Gandalf the White.
Well, I think I have the longest hair here, though.
Can I have three strands of it, please?
Well, since you asked so nicely.
Were you asking John or me? Should I feel generous or jealous?
I'll take 3 from each one of you and see if you actually do it.
That'll
be worth the joke.
Wait.
Right
so
there.
hold on. To jokingly respond, the answer is yes, but they're going to come off of the shower wall.
Oh, that's. I guess I'm not having dinner tonight. Thanks a lot.
The answer is yes, but when I come visit you, they'd better be darn well sitting in a block of quartz crystal on your mantle.
Put them in the next time you put a stamp on one of your envelopes.
Dear.
I think
By the way, this
I
is
think
for those watching. This is
I-
what our conversations are normally like.
I think it's time to say that we've gotten punch drunk, exhausted,
Yes.
and good night.
Oh, well, we're gonna. I have to go over the streaming schedule, and I also have to shill and everything. So let me do that.
Okay. Nice job. By the way, nice job leading us through this, John and
Thank you.
Sid. Excellent.
For those of you watching, if you are not
I'm
subscribed,
gonna go.
okay, Sid, just stay on the
Thank
call,
you.
okay?
Everybody. Take care.
Well,
Yeah,
you know what?
I'll
Oh, wait,
leave
you know what?
the
You don't
computer.
need to. You know what I'm gonna do? You
No,
can hang up if you need to.
No, don't worry about it.
I'm gonna go here.
I'll leave it. Okay.
Okay, for those of you watching who are not subscribed to the channel, which is possible, hey, you just listened to us for how long has it been? Let's see, 3 hours, 43
Over.
minutes. Now's the time to hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and you know what? Consider membership. Membership doesn't cost all that much. There are a lot of costs involved in running a channel like this and getting everybody together and being able to do this. It's only $5 a month, and you get some cool badges and emotes, and you get to see all the videos early. So just consider joining as a member. There should be a join button, as well as there is a link in every description. For streaming schedule, it's going to be most Thursdays. So next Thursday is the 10th, and I will be returning to read The Two Towers to you guys and to analyze analyze the text and to do a very lore-heavy and analytical read-through of the next few chapters of The Two Towers. On the 17th, we're going to finish that Hobbit game. We only have one chapter left, which is The Clouds Burst, which is where Bilbo goes through the Battle of Five Armies, and we'll talk about, all the lore in there, what they got right, what they got wrong, and we'll set up the next video game playthrough as well. We're going to play through the Fellowship of the Ring as well, which was made by the same people who developed that wonderful Hobbit game. And I've never played the Fellowship of the Ring, so that'll be really interesting. Like I said, that's going to be in 2 weeks on the 17th. And then the 24th, there will be a stream. It is to be announced what it is going to be. I will let you guys know. Keep an eye on the community tab. For those of you who are on Twitch, who are joining here for gaming streams, which are daily, I'll just give you the next couple of days. Tomorrow afternoon, we'll be playing Final Fantasy IV, the After Years. Saturday night is Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and Sunday night, we're going to finish up Bloodstained Curse of the Moon 2, which is a really fun time. So anyway, guys, I'm going to set up a raid for those of you on the Twitch side. For those of you on the YouTube side, it's just going to end, and we say goodbye to you, and goodbye to everybody in the chat, to Jonathan, Bonnie Bell, and CW Train, and David, and Deborah, and Laurel, and Moogle, and Alice, and everybody that I see lurking. I'm only going to call out people that I know don't mind it, like Gray and WT and Amethyst and Sega. So let's let me just set up the raid real quick. So let's see. We're gonna raid. Who's on? Oh, Amethyst. Perfect. She's lurking, and we'll raid her. She's playing that Blue Prince, which is a kind of a big deal game right now. So I will see you guys next time. And of course, for those of you on YouTube, there are new videos every Wednesday and most Fridays. Here we go.